The following program deals with a controversial
subject.
The theories expressed are not the only possible interpretation.
The viewer is invited to make a judgment based on all available information.
The top talents in the comic book business are here to tell everything they know.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Tuesday night, another Industry of Comics episode. This is Industry of Comics episode 17, here with Jesse and Dennis, Jesse James Comics, Wonderworld Comics, respectively, longtime industry vets. And we got an interesting show tonight. Tonight we have Ben Dunn of Antarctic Press and Tony Fleecs of the hardest working man in comics, basically. Multiple books, Local Man, Uncanny Valley, Feral. He's doing a book for Dynamite too. I mean, he's just the hardest working man in comics. So he's our second guest tonight. But usually we have the first guest here before the show and everything, and we get them prepped. And Bryan sent the wrong link tonight, and so
finally, Dennis wasn't the one that screwed up the show.
Yeah. So
well, it's what, 7 years now you doing this? You're still learning. So just a bit outside.
Sometimes you do so many shows and things just kind of move together, and when you hit copy and paste,
I do got to say though, the thumbnail for tonight's main show banner is, I think, maybe the best one yet.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
It really just kind of popped when I saw it.
Yeah.
Probably why you accidentally sent that instead of the StreamYard link.
Yes. Yeah. Well, one of the most important things about YouTube is your YouTube thumbnail and how all that stuff is. And that's why you see all those crazy thumbnails with people's faces and, doing these crazy expressions on there. You will never see that on Beyond Wednesdays.
Yeah.
So,
no, you just saw it right here.
No. You will never see that as a thumbnail on Beyond Wednesdays. So it's just a little goofy to me. And I try to make some decent thumbnails.
And it does catch you. Every time I see that it is comics going out of business and there's no feature for comics, I just I gotta watch the show. What the hell world are they in?
I'll tell you what, though, two of the most viral videos in my stream, and I'll tell you how viral they are. I've watched 3 other people's reaction video to those videos. Is Jenny Nicholson, the Millennial Falcon, and her 4-hour video about the Star Wars hotel. And then Red Letter Media just did our movie theaters dying, and I've watched 3 or 4 different reaction shows to that with 6 to 9 panel members discussing what Red Letter Media got right and what Red Letter Media. So, I mean, there is something to be said for talking about these topics, because clearly if the YouTube space, the people in it are like, I want to talk about their take on this discussion, then clearly it was worth discussing.
Sure. I know the recent one was Swag had the comics aren't rare, right? And so everybody started jumping in on that, and
he did a reaction to everybody's reaction.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're not rare. 90% of them aren't rare.
Right.
What is the definition of rare?
Well, rare is 15 comics or less. Scarce
is that like the given definition that across comics?
So rare is 15. Yeah, rare is 15. Scarce is less than 10. And so, I don't
think people realize that. I don't think that's a normal thing.
Well, I think census is.
We brought this up on the Discord, that comic book I found in one of my collections that. Shout out to Phil from Vintage Comics. He found this comic book, and we go to look up any comp, and there's 0 on GPA, there's 0 on eBay, there's not a Google image of it, and it was what was it called? Teen Town Comics number 17.
Yes.
It literally does not exist except for an Overstreet guide, and I don't actually. Didn't we look at an Overstreet and didn't even find it there?
I think we did look in, or somebody looked in Overstreet, and
and that was just in a collection of other Golden Age books that I had.
I own the copy of the prelude to Alice in Wonderland which there's only 2,000 copies made in 1867. And they were made in England, but they were sold in the United States. And I believe I'm the only person that has the only copy known. And it was actually pulled out of my dollar section by Tom Hutchinson. And we looked it up, and it's pretty crazy. I do have a scarce book, though. I do have a Whitman Woody Woodpecker. This is scarce.
You think there's less than 15 or 10 copies of this out there?
Yeah. Is that a 35 center?
This is a 10 center version that they decided not to do, but 10 still got out to the public. So I do own one of those. So that's pretty cool.
Wow.
But and it's all susceptible because if you're a retailer, AF-15s are a dime a dozen, right? But if you're a buyer, then they're hard to get. And when I say dime a dozen, I'm just saying that we see them a lot. They come in a lot.
You see them, you see them more than you see other crazy rare books that
and we talk about it all the time that the print runs, depending on the era, just because something is scarce or you haven't seen it doesn't mean that the print run. Brian, you were talking about Conan number 2 through 4 or 5 or 6. I can't remember where the scarcity hits, but it's listed in Overstreet as scarce. But they don't tell you is there's over 500,000 of number 1, if not 1 million, because we don't know what the print runs were on that. 2 had half of that. Right. Whatever that first issue, because retailers cut their orders for issue 2 because they hadn't sold issue 1 as hot as it was. So even scarce by Bronze Age, Silver Age numbers would be the greatest selling book right now on the market. Yeah. But nobody collected them. Nobody hoarded them. Nobody bought 5 copies, and
put them away, and they were in pristine condition. Yes.
I mean, except for Jesse, probably.
Right. I got it's crazy what I got in bulk. I mean, it is just a crazy thing. I think I still have a unsealed box of Battlestar Galactica number 1s. So that's 78 or 70. Yeah. Someone had it in their back room. I'm like, what's that? Oh, Battlestar Galactica is number 1. You don't want this. This is like 85. I'm like, well, I'll buy. How much you want for the whole box? $10. I'll take it. So I have that. Never been opened before. So it's
real quick. Since we're still waiting on Ben, okay. I've sent him the link a couple times on email and tried to send it to him through Facebook too. So hopefully he'll see that and be able to jump in. I want to read some of these links or some of these messages. Comics Embrace says, best show of the week, but I say that for every Beyond Wednesday show. Thank you, Comics Embrace. Appreciate that. Joe says, evening, everyone. Comic Book Man says, I really like Tomorrow Girl and Local Man, so this is right up my alley. When is Ben coming on? Soon, hopefully. Yeah. Shout out to Larry at Niobe Comics says, does Jesse James carry Antarctic Press books?
Yeah.
And if so, I hope he carries Niobe. Yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, I know Larry and Niobe just recently jumped on with Antarctic Press, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So shout out to him. Make sure you guys follow him on IG. Let me see if we get through this. Jesse, you sent him on Facebook the link.
Yeah, I sent it to as well. Yeah,
I'm gonna put the link in the private chat, and just so you can copy and paste it, maybe send it to him again.
I just did it over Facebook just in case.
Okay. All right. Oh, Larry says they've been with Antarctic Press for 2 years now. So, Jesse, I know you haven't started a new shop yet, but is there any plans? And where are you in Florida, if you don't mind saying?
So I am in DeLand, Florida, and our first store is going to be a warehouse. So we're looking for about a 6,000 square foot warehouse with about 200 square feet retail space in front. I think the issues in this climate day and age in the comic book world, for instance, I didn't even finish my live stream show till 5 a.m. this morning, right? And we had 181 exclusives, sold all 181 exclusives, got 3 hours sleep, had to get up and ship, right? And so our focus in Florida is live streaming, e-commerce, shipping, maybe pick up at the warehouse. And of course, the store in Glendale is retail. And they do some live streaming, but not as much as I do. So that's going to be coming soon. I think we have a very nice contract coming up with a very big company. And once that's signed, then we can commit to a lease and then join the Florida gang of very interesting sellers in the great state of Florida. So that is for sure. But a very different part of the world for me versus the West Coast. So.
Oh, yeah. And of course, Dennis, you are in Michigan, the Mall of Monroe, which is where in Michigan?
Halfway between Detroit and Toledo on I-75. Conveniently located 15 miles south of Detroit Metro Airport. In case you get stuck in Detroit and would like to have breakfast with me and then come and dig through my warehouse like Phil from Vintage Comics.
Yeah, that was pretty cool, man, to see him go. Not many people have been in that warehouse, man.
Nope.
Yeah, I was in a warehouse this past weekend, and it was mind-boggling.
Can I show the picture?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Oh, is that Phil's warehouse?
Yeah. It was a madhouse because when you first walk in, you walk into this room, and there's only maybe, 2, 4, 6, maybe 800 square feet. And then to the right, there's about 50 square feet, and there's like 30 people. I'm like, the hell did I drive 2 hours, or not 2 hours, an hour to get to this place? And then the guy says, are you here for comics? I go, yeah. Why don't you go in the back? And I turned that corner, dude, and it was freaking crazy. And even Shannon's in that picture, which is hilarious because she actually, at the end of the day, I ended up grabbing one long box. She ended up grabbing a long box and 2 short boxes. And she's just a hawk. She knows her business, knows what's to grab. And that's actually not really the busy part. The other side is busier. And you just have to go with the old school elbow room, right? You got to keep your elbows out wide so no one jumps in your box.
And you got to leave your stack on the box you want to go to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rather than.
Yeah. And so it was a great sell. And I think it's twofold, right? Sometimes I look and I say, well, if you have this many books, or you're not selling your books, to have them at clearance at 50 cents. And on the flip band, you're saying, okay, the books I haven't sold, let's just get rid of them. It's a two-paced business 101 theory there. The notion is that they're getting rid of books. That's the key.
Yeah.
There's no award in this business for the most comics.
In a warehouse, that you're sitting on.
Any other business? Yeah. Well, we'll see. Yeah. In any other industry, you would get fired on the spot, but in our industry, it's the more you have, the more people say, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing." But so it was fun. It was interesting, and we came out with a little over 1,200 books, and got kind of. I'm still trying to learn how to buy toys in bulk, and so I kind of laid off of that a little bit because turn rates on toys are a little bit different, and I don't know how to ship them yet. My team in Glendale knows how to ship toys. I don't. I would just throw them a box with paper and I hope it gets there type deal. Yeah.
Real quick, I looked up the Overstreet definition, like you were talking about, for rare, scarce, and very rare. Very rare, 1 to 10 copies.
Okay, that's where it is. Yeah.
Rare, 10 to 20 copies, and scarce, 10 to 100 copies. So that's great information that I've never heard anybody say other than you, which is,
Yeah, and keep in mind that's based on because someone today
was a pre-eBay definition for in convention quantities too.
Yeah, because someone today could say, "Look, I only made 10. It's only 10 copies because you only made 10 copies, right?"
All right, our guest is here.
All right, there we go.
So Jesse, why don't you introduce our guest tonight?
Right. All right. This is one of the great key holders in the comic book industry. He has been doing this a very long time. and he started in a genre that wasn't very familiar with us comic book fans. And so we have Antarctic Presses, Warrior Nun, Ninja High School. Ben Dunn is with us today.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, what's going on?
Ben.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, we're sorry.
That is a proper office right there.
Yeah, it's home. Well, a home away from home anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
What's going on, guys?
Well, Jesse, I want to correct Jesse's introduction slightly.
Okay.
Because much like what I said about Josh Blaylock and what we both said about Ross Ritchie, Ben Dunn seems to be 5 to 10 years ahead of the curve that most other publishers don't even know the bend is turning on.
Right.
I've looked over your just to get refamiliared because obviously as a comic retailer I know Antarctic Press and as a fan back in the day. You were literally creating books that no other publisher was capitalizing on a genre that you pretty much pioneered and knocked out of the park.
Oh, wow. Never thought of it that way. Now you put it in those terms.
Well, but see, we talk here on this show, Ben, about, the comic industry in general, and they lost a large segment of American comic book kids to video games.
Yes.
And the closest thing they came to was the Acclaim Mario and Zelda comic books. But you didn't go after that as much as you said, there's this other thing going on that American kids aren't even touching. And I think we can give this to the comic market and put it in a format that the retailers understand, because right now, Jesse and I talk about retailers that do not understand how to stock manga.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you have to comic retailers weren't familiar with manga. This is one of those things that eventually had to grow, and retailers had to adapt, to the changing environment. But I think there's plenty of room for both manga and American comics. I still love American comics. It's definitely a distinctive, art form. Hell, comics were invented here in the United States.
Well, Ben, so one of the things that we always ask our guests is, do you remember your first comic book and where you got it and what it was?
I do remember my first comic. First comic I ever bought off the stands was a Richie Rich Vaults of Mystery, and I used my allowance money, and I was a big fan of Richie Rich ever since then. Skipped over Archie, didn't care much for Archie, and then my first superhero comic was probably X-Men 107.
Ooh, that's a good one. Right
That's
before
a
the burn
starting
era.
point.
Yeah.
Ironically enough, the last Cockrum issue.
Yes.
X-Men.
Oh,
And where did you get that first comic book?
I got it at a Lone Star ice and food store, right off the spinner rack.
nice.
35 cents.
Another question that we usually ask right behind that is, other than selling comic books, what do you think a comic book store should be?
Well, as the name implies, it should be a comic book store. I mean, I don't know. I guess it depends on the market that they're trying to serve. My brother is part owner of a comic book store, and they do a lot of games. They sell lots of cards. They sell graphic novels. They sell toys. They sell new and used. The thing is, they don't really sell a lot of back issues. There's a rival comic book store that there's a rival comic books. They specialize in back issues and new issues. Not so much on the gaming, as our store, or his store does. But you cater to the market. You cater to what your audience wants.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's kind of why you're so special here. I mean, the audience didn't know it wanted Gold Diggers. And what year did you create Gold Diggers?
Well,
Ninja High.
Fred created Gold Digger, I think, in 1991. I think.
Yeah, it was in your magazine. Was that the name of the title?
Yeah, magazine number 11 was, I think, the first appearance of.
Yeah, but I mean,
He had been working for us several years before that.
What made you put the green light on that, though? I mean, that was something that was so far out in left field that no other publisher would have touched it at that time.
Well, we were a small publisher.
Right.
And, Fred was very persistent. So, he wanted to do it. We let him do it in Manga Z because we didn't think that was a low risk proposition, and he just worked at it. That was the thing. He was very passionate about his creation, and since we were a small publisher and wanted some sort of, steady series, to help us, a lot of small publishers don't realize how important it is to have a anchor series, for their company. It's something that they can rely on month after month.
How many issues did Gold Diggers go? Because I know it was still going when I opened my store in 2005.
Yeah, it just celebrated its 300th issue recently.
Right.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And I think without, most people that are Antarctic Press fans obviously know the name of Fred Perry and how important he is to comic books. Can you talk a little bit about Fred and how important he is?
Sure. What do you need to know? He got to start, by just submitting stuff. At first we thought he was a nuisance, because he kept submitting, over and over and over again, and we just didn't think he had his work was not quite there yet. At least we thought so, and then, but he kept sending stuff in. He would not give up, and then finally, we had the Ninja High School yearbook. We needed material for that, so we sent in a Ninja High School story, and we really liked it. So we published it, and that was his very first published work with us. And we said, and he kept submitting, more and more stories, and eventually we grew to like him. He says, "Hey, Fred, why don't you send something in?" And then eventually he moved to San Antonio.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, that actually that reminds me of a story. Do you know who Gary Reed is from Caliber?
Yes, I do. I don't know him personally, but I do.
Okay, well, Gary was one of my mentors, and he used to tell this story about this young kid from Ohio who kept submitting these scripts and coming up to the Caliber offices and bugging them, and that young whippersnapper is Brian Michael Bendis.
How about that?
Yeah, so you've got to sometimes you have to let the guard down to see if this kid's really as full of shit as you thought he was, or if he actually can perform.
Well, that's just to show you how important small publishers were.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Sure.
A lot of big names in the industry, their first big break. And it seems like a lot of publishers these days have forgotten that. That we're here to try to find and break in new talent,
So can I ask you, so obviously you had a very Asian-centric appetite for media.
Not at first.
Tell us about how that whet your appetite and how you decided to, kind of steer the ship into that for a good 10 years.
Well, I grew up reading American comics because I thought that was all there was. It never occurred to me that there'd be comics in other countries. All I thought was just, America. So, and that's all. That was all I was exposed to was American comics. Because there were no other type of comics. It was Marvel and DC. That was pretty much Harvey, maybe Archie. I was aware of Charlton, but everyone ignored Charlton. So
Right.
I was aware of Atlas. I saw Atlas on the comic stands. When it first came out, and I thought, boy, these sure look like Marvel comics. So, and I don't know if that was intentional or not, but anyway, but it was only when I went overseas that I finally realized, hey, other countries have comics too, and that's where I discovered manga, because it was different, and you could, even in another country, comics are comics,
Right.
so you could tell it was graphic storytelling. The only difference was that it read from the other end. It's still, instead of reading from, left to right, they read from right to left. So it was, that was some getting used to, and then also they printed all the comics in black and white, which, I was aware of black and white comics, but they were pretty underground or niche, or, they were not taken seriously, because, at least for me, because they weren't in color, But I love the graphic storytelling in manga, and that's where I started to fall in love with the art form. And this was like the mid 70s. So manga back then was way different than manga it is now.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, you had, if you're going abroad, you probably would have seen Super Sentai and realized this thing is basically like a revolving Avengers team.
Yeah, Super Sentai was actually fairly new.
Right.
So,
and then you're the first person to bring Power Rangers here to the U.S.
Well, I wasn't. I wasn't the first to bring Power Rangers. That was Saban, But I did was the first to bring the idea of Super Sentai.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Zetraman in Ninja High School. Because I was exposed to Sentai, through VHS, because my mom's relatives were fairly well off, so they could afford a VHS machine, which was like exotic technology.
Right.
And it was very expensive, so it was very impressive that they had a VCR, because it was a very uncommon machine to own, because they were so expensive, but they were able to they were actually a little mom and pop rental shows, the little mom and pop rental areas that we could go and rent VHS tapes to watch, and you could buy them, if you wanted to. And they offered to buy some VHS tapes for me that had Super Sentai shows. That's where I saw the Spider-Man TV show, on one of those VHS. I said, no way. It's Spider-Man in Japanese. I thought, and it was not like, he said, what is this? He looked like Spider-Man, but he wasn't Spider-Man, because he drove a giant robot. He's doing all this crazy stuff.
He had a motorcycle. He had a
car. Doing all this martial art stuff, and the character didn't look anything like Peter Parker. So I said, this must be a very different version of Spider-Man. So that's where I was first exposed to the Takukatsu, or whatever they call it nowadays.
Right.
Leopardon. Leopardon is the name of his robot.
Right. So I brought that over, and nobody knew what to make of it.
Right.
It's like, what is this? This is so exotic, so different. So in Ninja High School number 7, I created the Zetraman, which is my version of a Super Sentai team. And that predates, Super Sentai in comics as far as that was concerned. Because I know that so that was like around 88, 89. So it did predate Power Rangers, but it came out about the same time that there was a show called Dynaman on Night Flight.
Yes, I love
it. Which was a What's Up Tiger Lady treatment for the Super Sentai show at the time. So
we are 5 different. We are 5 Asian kids from different walks of life.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Unfortunately, it didn't take off. So,
right.
And then I just kept going with the Zetraman thing until it was announced they were going to do Power Rangers, and I was very excited by that. I thought, finally, we're going to get Super Sentai in the United States, and it was I never really thought it was going to take off, but it turned out to be extremely popular.
Right. Can you tell us about Marvel Mangaverse and how that came about, and your thoughts on that now?
Well, I got the idea because I had a pen pal in Japan, and we were exchanging toys and video TV shows. I would record. This is like the 80s. early 80s. You know, I was recording like shows like G.I. Joe, you know, Transformers, things like that for him. And he was recording Japanese shows for me. And then we would exchange TV shows.
Right.
And then eventually he wanted me to buy toys. So I bought him G.I. Joe toys. I bought Transformer toys. You know, I bought him all sorts of He-Man toys, things like that. You know, but in exchange, you know, we didn't send money to each other. We basically, and I thought, well, I collect toys too, but I collect Japanese toys. So he would send me Japanese toys in exchange for American toys, you know, and that's how I was able to get exposed to a lot of Japanese shows, you know, and I still have a huge library of, you know, all those boxes back there. They all contain VHS tapes from the 80s. You know, I still have them even today, you know, and so that's where I started to get exposed to that as well, you know. And then he was also a big fan of American comics. Okay, so he had a what is called a circle. You know, in Japan they have these circles of fans that they get together and they share a passion, like fan groups here. Yeah. You know, and then I'm not sure if you're aware of Comic Ket. Comic Ket is a huge Japanese fanzine convention. It's huge, and it makes San Diego look like a small time convention. You know, they literally attract hundreds of thousands of people to these conventions. So he was a group of, he loved American comics, but he would send me his fanzine, and they would do manga versions of American superheroes. And I saw that, I says, holy crap, I've never seen this before. You know, I've never seen this before. So I started adapting that, you know, to my own thing. And I said, I got the idea, why don't I propose this version of Marvel to Marvel and see if they'll take it, you know? And it was a totally out of the blue submission.
Right, sure.
Totally out of the blue. What I did is I put together a package, sent it. Joe Quesada was the editor at the time, and I FedExed the package to him with the proposal. You know, I put together a nice little presentation. I said, and honestly, I didn't think they were going to get back to me. You know, I honestly think that they would have just ignored it. But you know what? I thought to myself, nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Amen.
You know, so I figured you might as well go ahead and do it and see where it takes you. And so about a week or two, I get an email from him saying that, yeah, we want to do it. And I thought to myself, this has got to be a joke.
Right.
It's no way. But it was serious. It was totally a legit, you know, email. And they said, let's do this, you know, and, you know, my original intent, and I was very excited. I said, "Oh my God, I get to work for Marvel!"
Right.
that was on my, you know, my dream. You know, I wanted to, you know, always work for Marvel. You know, so I finally got an opportunity. Of course, it's a roundabout sort of way, but in the end, it's still the result was the same. So they had a 5th week event coming. I'm not sure you're aware of what 5th week events are.
Go ahead and tell the audience it's like a lull in the structure of your schedule that you can shove something in and kind of fill the space up with.
Right.
Something new.
If during the year, Marvel puts out monthly books, okay, but most months are 4 weeks, so they have a schedule where they have the books come out, you know, during the weeks. But every once in a while, there's a month with a 5th week. So instead of Marvel saying, you know, let's not ship anything, Marvel being Marvel says, let's put something out. So a lot of things, a lot of event things that back in the day that Marvel did, DC did as well, was they put out event things for what is called a 5th week event. You know, something to fill the gap, you know, between the weeks that the week that is supposed to be, you know, don't have the regular Marvel stuff. You know, so they would sometimes shove in, you know, new ideas, new mini series, new things. Like the amalgam stuff was like a 5th week, you know.
Yeah, sure.
So they shoved in Marvel Mangaverse in a 5th week event, and they didn't give me a lot of time, to do it. My original intent, my original proposal was it was the what if Marvel had started in Japan. That was my conceit. Was that what if instead of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby starting Marvel here in America, what if Osamu Tezuka or Ishimori has started Marvel in Japan? What would their take have been on these Marvel characters? That was the hook. So and I was going to release each title in the order that Marvel released their title. So the first book would have been Fantastic Four. The second one would have been Incredible Hulk. The third one would have been Spider-Man. The fourth one would have been Iron Man. In that order, the same order that the Marvel heroes had come out at the same time. But they said, "No, we can't do that. It's a 5th week event. We got to shove it in all at once." So what I did was I did the 2 bookends, and then they hired a whole bunch of other artists who drew in the manga style and had them do their own take of the Marvel universe. And it was quite an interesting array of interpretations, I can tell you that much.
Well, so Ben, I mean, it was absolutely something that stuck out on the wall. I know so many people have bought it. Why did they leave that on the table and not follow through with that for at least a year or two?
Well, I think what it was is that it was people are either purists or they were superhero, Marvel zombies, basically. They didn't like a different take on the Marvel universe, being interpreted in a different fashion. Because, in the manga purists, they weren't into Marvel superheroes. They were into manga.
Right.
Manga is very distinct in its own art, in its own way, and a lot of them had a lot of them believed that only authentic manga from Japan is considered real manga. So, Marvel manga was sort of stuck in this nebulous zone. It did pretty well when it first came out. It was so successful they gave me a 6-issue miniseries. And then C.B. Cebulski took it even further. He extended even further than that. And then there was a time that Marvel was actually doing, Marvel style art on their comics, like on the X-Men and stuff. Like there was a run of X-Men that had very manga style art. But I think eventually they realized that the Marvel purists, they just wouldn't accept it. So they had to go back, to what they were known for. So, and I think they abandoned that model because Marvel is not manga. Marvel's Marvel. They're used to doing what they're doing.
Like I said at the beginning of the show, you were about 10 years ahead of where the curve would actually catch them.
Right.
Well, I don't know about that. Yeah, but I do say I was lucky that I got in when I did. I'm very lucky because I'm probably one of the, as short a stint as it was at Marvel, I was very lucky that I got to draw almost every single major Marvel character, in the Marvel Mangaverse. A lot of artists don't get that opportunity to be honest.
So that was your big bucket list check off.
Oh my gosh, yes. I got to draw Fantastic Four, I got to draw Spider-Man, Hulk, I got to draw X-Men, I got to draw Ghost Rider. I mean,
and your Wolverine ended up, I think, close to 15 years later, became the hottest Mark Millar book, Old Man Logan.
And then I think we also did like a female Doctor Doom. And then we created a sister for Black Panther in the Marvel Mangaverse. I mean, there was all sorts of weird stuff we did, because we were able Marvel really let us just do whatever the hell we wanted, I mean, we just went wild and crazy,
and that wild and crazy, it kind of reminds me of one of the other things that I think Antarctic Press is kind of known for. And Brian, I put it in the private chat. Mm-hmm. You have been one of the foremost parody comic publishers. You've come up with so many great parodies, and you've skirted that line very, very close.
Well, the thing about it is there's a rule in parody that you have to make your 5 changes, basically. So as long as it's like you make like 40 to 40% changes, you're pretty safe. Also there's a difference between just strictly doing parody and doing to us, even if you're going to do a parody, you still should treat it like a serious story, and that's to me is the difference is that, you could do a parody, but it can eventually turn out. I mean, look at Turtles. Turtles was a parody.
Yes.
Daredevil.
It was a big parody of Daredevil, but they created enough uniqueness to the story that they were able to stand out on its own. And I think a lot of people don't understand that parody for parody's sake usually doesn't last very long. But if you take a parody and make it your own, then that's when it becomes a thing of its own. Right. And that's where I think a lot of people make the mistake that when as far as doing parodies are concerned.
Well, also Ben, when I look at these characters, I don't think Star Wars right off the bat. They're changed enough, they look different enough, and then, like you said, the storyline is also the important thing. This is a cool storyline. This is almost like a what if Star Wars was, this is like a steampunk what if type thing that is smart. There's an intelligence to the story also, and you said that's very important. I imagine on how the IP holders or the rights holders view these also, in a good way.
Well, sometimes it can work against you. I mean, we've had run-ins with other companies that when we take the parody a little too far, and we had to pull back a little bit.
Can you talk about any of those, like that how you changed it or how you pulled back after that situation happened?
Oh yeah, just a couple of examples. Like we did a thing called Diary of a Zombie Kid, and at first we thought we could get away with it, but after it proved to be actually fairly successful, I think the publisher of Diary.
It's one of my favorite free comic book day offerings as well.
Oh yes, I forgot we had done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that they actually thought of it as a genuine threat. So they, at least that's my take on it. Because if it wasn't considered a threat, they probably would have ignored it for the most part. But we were actually doing pretty well with it, and they threatened to sue us, so we had to pull back. And then we basically just canceled the whole thing altogether. Right. So we realized that maybe it was a little too close, and we did what we could, and that was another example. Was we did a manga called Star Trekker, which was a fanzine of Star Trek done in Japan, and we got a hold of the artist, and he gave us permission to reprint his story. Now we got away with it the first time, but when we announced but he had enough material for a second book. So when we announced we were going to do a second book, oh boy, that pissed me off. So they came down hard. Said, "Well, we let you get away with it once. You're not going to get away with it again." So we never released the second series. So
it's important. Is it important to have a relationship with the people or the IP that you are trying to do this with? I mean, should you reach out to? Do you think that should you reach out to those people and let them know first? I'm asking for maybe people that are coming up in the industry, and we see a lot of very close walking the line of IP infringement, more so than we've ever have nowadays. I mean, is that something that people should try and do, is maybe reach out to the people they're trying to
you can try. Certainly you can try. You can communicate with them, but chances are they're not going to be very receptive. First of all, they're you didn't come to them to begin with. So you just basically did your parody, didn't ask permission anyway. So right there, you're on shaky ground, and then second of all, they have to be very protective of their IP, because when they feel like there's any threat to their IP, they have to run and protect it. They have to, because in this country, if you don't protect your copyright or your trademark, it can fall into the public domain. There's a lot of examples of IPs that have just been abandoned. It ignored or haven't been renewed. So there's countless examples, especially in comics, of IPs that have simply been lost to time, just right for the picking for anybody who wants to pick it up. But you have to be careful, because sometimes what you may assume is public domain is not. For instance, like Thunder Agents never actually had copyright information in their book, so technically they're public domain. But
wow. Okay.
The thing is, there are people who claim the rights to Thunder Agents. So if you attempt to try to do Thunder Agents, they're going to try to stop you from doing it, because they'll claim they own it. Now, you could fight it, and usually the one with the most money is the one that comes out the winner. They may not win, but they'll outlast you. Their hope is that they'll bankrupt you before you have a chance to actually go to court or go through a long trial. That's how Disney plays their hand. They have so much money that even if they don't think they're going to win, they'll still do it, because they have so much money, and they'll pretty much bankrupt you before you say, victory, but I have no money.
Right.
Yeah.
What's funny is let me do this one.
Go ahead, Jesse.
So you had talked about Marvel being kind of this crazy company, and they do these wild things, but Antarctic Press over the last 18 months has just been on fire. Open houses coming up. You got AP value stamps. What is driving this? I guess you could call it this aggressive marketing right now.
Oh, I don't call it aggressive marketing. I just call it engagement with the fans. That's something publishers used to do. If you look at the old Silver Age, Bronze Age books, gosh, Stan Lee was talking directly to me. When I read his Stan Soapbox, when I read the letters page, I felt like I was part of a community, part of something big.
The Merry Marching Marvel Society. And
Marvel seemed inviting. They wanted you to come in. They wanted you to participate in their Marvel universe. Now it doesn't seem they care. It's like, buy our latest variant cover. It's like there's a disconnect now with a lot of big publishers and their fans. They don't listen to their fans. They don't.
Yes.
Right.
They have no interest, and this is what befuddles me a lot: is that why in the world are they still buying it? I guess it's either habit, or they just want to keep up with the character, or they feel like there's maybe speculation, in some of the titles that it would have occurred to me. It should have occurred to I've been trying to say to retailers that you need to expand your offerings so that you're not over reliant on two publishers. And now
that don't care.
Taking up. Well, to be fair, okay, the most comic book owners grew up reading Marvel and DC. And because back then they did engage fans.
Sure.
They made them part, and so they were passionate about the product that Marvel and DC were putting out. I was with that too. I loved Marvel and DC. I'm DC not so much, but Marvel, I was a big fan, and eventually I even started to like DC. One of my favorite DC books. Believe it or not, one of my favorite DC comics of all time was Legion of Superheroes. I loved Legion of Superheroes, especially the early Jim Shooter stuff. It's so crazy and over the top.
But see, that's exactly the thing. Jim Shooter was a fan who got to write Legion.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's more engagement than most of those early writers had, because they all grew up, or they all were adults writing comic books,
right? And just all continued. The people who grew up reading that, they eventually became fans, and then eventually wanted to work for them, so they carried on the tradition. Now, Marvel and DC, they hire outside the company. The people they hire, they don't care about Marvel. I bet 90% of them has never read a Marvel comic.
Oh, Brian, I think we need to go unfiltered on this.
Yeah,
one.
we need to go unfiltered on
Hold
this
on, Ben.
real quick, Ben. 1 second.
Yo, let's do this.
valuable commodity I know of is information. Wouldn't you agree?
We're back from Unfiltered.
You know, but it's just not for me anymore. You know, I just,
Well, the thing is, you know, when you hire, I remember what around the middle part of me being a retailer, all of a sudden it was like, hey, you have to buy this because this New York Times bestseller writer of this normal nonfiction story is going to start writing this comic book. And I'm like, okay, but what other comic books have they written? You know, and they're just like, no, just buy it because they were a New York Times bestseller. And I'm like, no, I don't care.
yeah. I mean, also when they abandoned continuity, you know, and they abandoned what these characters stood for. I mean, that just seems like, what are you doing? You know, I mean,
Right.
You know what it tells me, Ben? It tells me that they don't care about that history. When you abandon that history, especially with history with these, you know, characters that are almost 100 years of history, that means you don't care about it to me. And I think that you've kind of, what we've all stated and heard tonight is that's a big part of the big two these days.
yes, I agree. You know, the thing about it is they could have done this organically. You know, the thing about it is that, you know, if they had really thought about it and know that, oh yeah, maybe these characters are starting to get a little, you know, long in the tooth, you know, let's start building up from the ground floor a new generation of heroes that carry on and respect the tradition of, you know, the original characters. And they could have done this over a long period of time, started to, you know, create new characters like, you know, like Franklin Richards could have easily have been the heir to the Fantastic Four if they had just done it organically.
Yeah.
You know, built up the character, let people know who it is, you know, and then when Franklin Richards became I'm just using it as an example.
Right, sure.
You know, when Franklin Richards became an adult, then he could have taken, you know, there could have been a great issue where Reed Richards decides, you know what, you know, I'm starting to get arthritis. I can't do this anymore. So, you know, Franklin, you're going to take over the Fantastic Four, you know, and I think people would have loved that. They would have said,
Yeah.
oh,
And what's so fun about this, Ben, is did we not just talk about this, Brian, 2 days ago? This is hilarious that you're bringing that up. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the thing is when they started, you know, back in the 90s when they were doing all these gimmicks, relaunching titles, I think that was the biggest mistake they made was, you know, in response to Image, they decided to relaunch all their titles. And I think that was, you know, that really screwed things up, you know, and then they started to start straying away, you know, from the continuity, and they kept switching teams, and, you know, and also they were just pumping out title after title after title. You know, when I was growing up, and I'm sure you can identify with this too, when I went to the comic store, there was one X-Men title.
Yeah.
One, maybe two Spider-Man titles, one Fantastic Four title, one Daredevil title, one, you know,
Two Spider-Mans though.
you know,
Peter Parker.
Yeah, that was it. So
Yeah.
it was affordable. I could keep up with it.
Yeah.
You know, I knew what was going on, you know, but then when they started releasing X-Force, Excalibur, X-Men, and I said, what the heck's going on here?
Right.
Which title do I follow now?
Well, it's because Marvel realized you still had some change in your pocket and they wanted it.
Well, they want to realize that when you sold to the direct market, you don't got to get any returns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Sure.
you just once it's out of our door, that's your problem now. You know, so that's a very corporate attitude to take. You know, it's almost like they don't care about the retailers, they don't care about the fans. They just want to sell as many comics out the door as they can. You know, because truth be told, is the publishing is, you know, very precarious. It's always been precarious. Marvel has been on the edge's cliff of bankruptcy several times. You know, a lot of people don't know this, but Marvel almost went out of business several times during its in its life. You know, I mean, and DC too. During the 70s, that was that big, huge collapse. The DC, and if it wasn't for Warner Brothers buying DC because they wanted Superman, you know, then DC might have gone out of business.
Well,
Right.
Ben, one of the things that they talked that we kind of heard rumors about for years, and that we still hear rumors about, you know, every once in a while, is there's these rumors that DC characters might become leased out or leasable and this type of thing, and
that makes sense.
It
If
does.
you're a corporation, okay, if you're a corporation and you own this company called DC Comics, and you have 80 years of inventory, 80 plus years of inventory, that if you were to reprint day one, Action Comics #1, and just reprint every single book from there on, you have another 80 years of material. You don't have to
don't give them any ideas, Ben. Don't give them any ideas.
But then we think about it, and it's just, why are we running a comic book company? When we could just rent them out to other publishers, and we don't have to do anything. We just collect the royalty checks.
Yeah.
We don't have to hire any. We don't have to deal with the creators. We don't have to deal with printers. We don't have to deal with shipping. We don't have to deal with distributors. We don't have to deal with, this, that, and the other. It makes sense. If I was a number cruncher, I would say, why are we still running DC Comics? Why are we still running Marvel Comics? I mean, we're losing money on these guys.
Right.
It's about the IPs, the idea. We got Hollywood writers right next door that can take any of these characters. The thing about it is they're already established. Everyone knows who Superman is. Everyone knows who Batman is. Who Wonder Woman is. We don't need to establish anything. Everyone knows who they are. And as far as the new characters are concerned, who cares? Nobody cares about Blue Beetle. Nobody cares about, Martian Manhunter.
Right.
We could put those characters in there as new characters in movies, and people says, "Oh, that's a new character. They've seen that one before."
Right.
So, and we could just go from there. I mean, movies have such a huge when you compare movies to comics. Comics are way down here, and some movies are way up there. They're not in the same league.
That leads me to my next topic, which is you had your little taste of Hollywood with Aerial Warrior Ninja.
Warrior Nun,
Warrior Nun. Sorry.
Warrior Nun.
That was Ninja High School on this brain, and then So how did that Hollywood go? Because I know that was in development for years, and then all of a sudden just gets dropped on, what was it, Netflix?
Well, the thing about Hollywood is its own beast. Okay, it is its own thing. Once you sell, once you get in bed with Hollywood with your IP, you can say goodbye to it.
Right. Sure.
It's gone. You will have no control over it. If they want you to be part of it, then they'll ask you to be part of it. Because otherwise, they'll ignore you. They'll just say, we're going to do our own thing. So the only thing is what you negotiate. They are very, very contract,
litigious,
obsessed.
oriented. Yeah.
If it's not in writing, then they can do whatever the hell they want.
So I've never heard what you thought of your project.
Oh, I loved it.
Right.
But I just the mere fact that something I created is on TV or Netflix is, to me, out of this world, because how many other creators can say that?
Right.
One of their IPs made into something other than comics. It's actually very rare, for that to happen. And to have 2 seasons of it is even more rare. It's not quite the same as the comic, but I realize that it's an adaptation. It's going to be different.
So aside from the check that Hollywood gave you, did you see a real bump?
I didn't get a check. I got zero. The only thing I got was a trip to Spain.
Unbelievable, Ben. Unbelievable. Why is that?
Really?
So how did you
I sold the rights. I sold the rights to Warrior Nun way before the show came out.
Oh,
I sold it to Avatar Comics, because at the time, despite what you may think, I am not a wealthy man, so as a comic book creator, health insurance is not exactly on my,
right. Sure.
I'm on my wife's health insurance because she has great health insurance, so I just pay her and say, "Hey, honey, can I be on your health insurance?" Yeah, okay. Right. I just pay her to be on health insurance. So we had some medical bills we had to take care of, and I got an offer from Avatar to buy Warrior Nun. It was a really good offer, You know, it was pretty substantial. I took it, you know, not thinking that this would ever get off the ground, to be honest, because, you know, it had been in development hell for 10 years, you know, so it'd been there for quite some time. So, and I needed the money, so I sold it. Then, but lo and behold, you know, 3 or 4 years later, it becomes a Netflix series.
Yeah, there you go.
So, even if I had kept the rights, I still wouldn't have gotten really all that much money.
Right.
I mean, it would have been a good chunk, you know. If I certainly would have been unhappy with it for sure, you know. But it would have been a very and you know, I wouldn't have complained about it because, you know, it was actually pretty good money, you know.
Right.
But I didn't get anything, but that's okay because my guy who owned the rights to the TV version got it in the contract that I was to get a trip to Spain and for the beginning of the filming and the end of the filming.
Awesome.
And I got a full creator's credit. You know,
Nice.
Okay.
you know, one screen of my own with my name on it.
That's awesome.
There you go.
That's
so,
awesome.
Talking about projects, since we were talking about projects, how important is April 2025 for you? I know you started your sketch on that book for April 2025, your 200th issue. How important is that for you?
Oh, it's a milestone for me. You know, 200 issues. I never thought I'd get that far, to be honest. You know, the thing about it is I probably would have gotten even further. I probably would have celebrated at 200 many years ago, but back in the early 2000s, Diamond instituted a minimum order policy. I'm not sure if you were aware of that back then, but Diamond had instituted if a book didn't meet a threshold in sales, then they wouldn't carry the book.
Oh, wow.
And unfortunately, Ninja High School fell just under that threshold, so we had to put it on hiatus. You know, so there was a long period of time when Ninja High School, it was about 5 years that it remained dormant. You know, Ninja High School, I didn't put out any new Ninja High School books. You know, had I done that, I probably would have put about 10 issues a year. And that would have been 50 issues. I would have probably been number like 250 by now had I continued to make Ninja High School. But then Diamond, you know, dropped that threshold thing, and I was able to bring back Ninja High School. You know, so that's where, and now I'm starting to play catch up. You know,
Gold Diggers and Ninja High School just always seem to be one of those properties that you're expecting a video game out of or an anime out of. Did you ever have people knock on your door to do it?
Oh yes. Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about what the development hell was involving two of your biggest properties?
Well, Fred himself decided to take it on his own to do his own anime. He's that talented. He's like a Renaissance man. He can just do anything. You know, he can program and everything. So he just did it on his own. I on the other hand, am not as talented or tech savvy as he is. You know, I'm a very traditional comic book artist. I still use pen and paper. You know, I only use digital mainly for coloring. You know, because coloring takes too much time, and computers make it a lot easier. So yes, I've been optioned several times over the last 4 decades. You know, the thing about options, though, I'm not sure if you're aware of it.
We're aware.
Yeah,
so go ahead and tell the audience.
Merely a promise that you're not going to sell it to anybody else. You
know,
that's basically what it is. You know, and they hold on to that property for X number of time, you know, to do something with it, and then it expires, and then they can renew it if they feel like they can still do something.
It was explained to me once as an engagement ring. You can't go running off with anyone else, but I don't have to actually get married to you.
That's a good analogy, actually. You know, until the wedding happens, it's just an engagement. You know, for the most part. You know, so a lot of people get options, you know, and they make a big deal about it, but that doesn't mean anything. That means squat. You know, all that means is that somebody likes your stuff enough to pay you some money, and it can be as low as $1. You know, sometimes it could be nothing. It could just be a promise. You know, unless you actually see money for an option, anybody can say they have an option. You know, if some Joe Blow with a production company comes up to you and says, "Hey, I like your stuff. Can I get an option? But I can't pay you. But here, sign your rights away anyway."
Right, exactly.
Sure.
So we have some great comments in the chat. If you have some time for us to read some of these.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
yeah.
Let's hear it.
So Emmett, one of our favorite retailers from Haven for Heroes, said, "Why did you take the print run out of the books? It used to be known for putting the print run of your book in the book."
Yes. I don't know why we stopped doing that. It could be we're just embarrassed by it, man. I don't know. I mean, truth be told, I mean, our print runs are pretty pathetic. I mean, right now the industry is not is where it should be, in my opinion. So if I were to do print runs, I mean, we could. I mean, we've got nothing to hide. It's just I guess we just either forgot, we didn't bother, or we just didn't think anyone cared. It's just that I mean, and maybe, like I say, we could be just we don't want people to know what a real print run is.
Yeah.
But,
can we talk about that? Can we talk about that real quick, Ben? Because
sure, of course, yes.
One of the questions and one of the comments in the chat was from.
You missed it. I already asked.
Oh, I apologize. Okay, continue then.
That's what we were on. That's why we were on the topic, because I was reading. I'm reading the comments from the chat.
Yeah, we were very proud of our print runs back then, but now it's like not so much.
Right.
But I mean, it is if it's something that people would demand, then I see no reason why we can't put the print runs in there. But it's not my call. I don't make that decision.
Well, we do have a comment in the chat. I don't know if you want to get into this, but I'll read the comment and you can tell us whether or not you want to talk about it. This comes from Lord of Brooklyn.
Sure.
To Ben, what is your relationship with Mark Waid, and did he ever attempt to intimidate you into canceling the publishing deal with Diversity in Comics, aka Richard C. Myers?
Well, I know of him. I don't know him intimately. I've met him maybe once or twice throughout the career. He seems like a pretty nice guy, very passionate, very talented individual. I mean, he has written some really nice comics, I don't know, him personally. I was there when he did call. So I did a deposition when Richard Meyer sued Mark Waid for tortious interference. I did go to the lawyer's office and gave my deposition. I didn't really, to be honest, I don't know why I was there. But my brother, who is the actual publisher of Anarch Press, took the call, and he took it in another room. I was in the next room. I mean, I could hear him talking, but I wasn't privy to the actual conversation. He came out, was never very visibly upset. So I don't know what he said to my brother. He won't talk about it, and I don't blame him. It probably was a very sore subject. So, and he made the decision. He thought about it long and hard. He didn't just make a decision right away. He thought it long and hard. That's when people started, deluging, AP with all sorts of emails, stuff like that. And I just think that he didn't want to take that path, and he decided, he made the decision. He actually asked me about it. And I said, no, don't do it. Just do the book as you planned, but he said, no, he couldn't take the pressure of the mob, so he decided to cancel. Now, to Richard's credit, he understood. When we told him that we weren't going to do it, he was, of course, disappointed, but he understood at the same time. He wasn't mad or upset or anything else like that. At least he wasn't visibly, that, as far as I could tell. So, but it actually worked out because he did very well on his own.
Did.
And one of the most successful crowdfunders of all time at that moment. He started the whole, whatever they call it, Comicscape movement.
Yes. Yeah.
Shout
out to your boy Zach.
Now it's this thing. It's of its own. It's become its own entity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So sometimes things just work out the way they work out. So it's a negative.
Right. I do. Well, and that's
Go ahead, Dennis.
Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No, go ahead.
So, as one of the things we had, do you know Darren Davis from Blue Water and Tidal Wave?
Yes, I'm familiar with their titles.
Yeah. So I lovingly gave him a title for a segment of his comic books called Ambulance Chasing Comic Books. And you're yeah, so it's not an offensive phrase. It's actually a compliment.
What would that be about? I wonder.
Well, like when you see a trend, you're like, hey, we can do something with that trend. And I brought this from my personal collection on my wall. And am I not mistaken? But I know it's not the first Barack Obama, but I think this might be the first Joe Biden in comic books.
Well, I very well could be. I have no idea whether that's true or not. I personally was not responsible for that book, so I have no
Kelsey
idea.
Shannon.
Yeah, that's another CG guy. But I do want to talk, ask Ben about one book that's been part of my collection for a long time. One of the very many books that I've got by searching through Jesse James's comic book store. And I want to find out the story on it because it is amazing. And that is Ninja High School. STD
that's a rather infamous comic, actually.
What people should know. This comic is amazing, Ben, and I would love for you to tell the story about it if you can.
Well, that was actually my brother's idea.
Okay.
Never in a million years would I say, I'm going to do a comic book about STD. No.
Yeah.
He got the idea that would be a good public service thing to do, and he came up and asked me if I would be willing to do it. And says, hey, yeah, sure, no problem, I could do it. So he wrote it, I drew it, he printed it, and he distributed it out to schools and things like that to see if that would help kids be more aware of things like that. So,
yes.
I could never have written stuff like that myself because I'm not an MD. I'm not qualified, but I can draw comics. So
there you go.
That's how it came about, pretty much.
What was the response to it? You said that there was a little. Was there a bad response to this, or?
Quite frankly, I have no idea what the response is. To be honest, I know it's become sort of a cult comic,
yes,
there you go. So it's like, it's such a strange subject matter to tackle on a comic book, but it's not the first time that comics have tackled things like that. They've tackled drug abuse, and they've tackled juvenile delinquency. I mean, who could forget the Reformed Schoolgirl comic?
Yes.
Yes, they've done anti-communist propaganda comics, things like that. So it's not unusual for comics to tackle weird, so Spider-Man tackled drug abuse, Speedy was a junkie, so it's like it's not unusual. So we figure, let's just dip our hats in the ring and see where it takes us, And that's the thing about comics. Comics are so. The beauty of comics is it's the immediacy of it. You can sit down, draw a comic in practically no time at all, and get it out there, in no time flat. It's not like a movie or a TV show or anything like that where you have to have, hundreds of people working on a production. You by yourself in a drawing board, you can produce a comic in no time.
Sure.
Another thing.
We only got a couple minutes, Ben, but
okay.
Can you tell us anything about your collaboration with Cerebus and Ninja High School?
Well, I'm a big fan of Cerebus. I've always loved the comic. The later issues, not so much. I loved Cerebus the Barbarian, the early issues of Cerebus where he was a kick-ass, aardvark and stuff like that. And I don't blame Dave Sim for wanting to do something different with his character, and he did. He really did something. He did and made a mark. So I got the idea that I wonder what Dave Sim is doing these days. So I found out his contact information. I just wrote him out of the blue and say, hey, you want to do a crossover? And he said, we didn't say no. So he said, yeah, send me a proposal and I'll look it over. And I said, so I went hard to work, sent him a proposal, and he seemed to like it. So we're in the process of getting it. The script has been approved. So right now I'm in the middle layouts. So I sent him the first 20% of the stories layout story for his approval, and if he approves that, then I'll send the second 2/3 of the story, and then the last third of the story, and then if that's a go, then I'm going to sit down and start drawing it. So it's
awesome.
The great thing is that since he owns 100% of the character, I can go directly to the creator and just ask him directly. Say, hey, you want to do I know Stan Sakai. I could probably go up to him and say, hey, can we do Isagi Yojimbo Ninja High School crossover?
There you go.
Yes or no? You can just say that, or so maybe. Because I know Stan is very protective of his Usagi character. I think he only crossed over very few characters, and one of them being the Turtles, of course.
So this was a question, and I actually was thinking this at the exact same time. I have been going to conventions for 30 years now, Ben. I don't think your path and my path have ever crossed except for on this show. I've been a retailer for 19 years.
Well, we may have. We just didn't know it.
I just didn't know it. But you do seem to not be on the convention circuit as much as, we'd love to see you. Is that intentional, or do you
I have a general rule about going to conventions. I usually don't go to conventions unless Antarctic Press asks me to, or if someone invites me and they meet my criteria, which is very simple criteria.
Yeah.
Right.
All I ask is that travel expenses, hotel stay and a table. That's it. I don't even really ask for a fee or anything else like that. And if it's within, if I have an open calendar date, then I usually attend.
Okay.
That's
all you people in the chat saying you want to see Ben, get off your asses and talk to your local conventions to cough up some money to get a living legend.
Well, I'll be honest with you though. Conventions can be a real pain in the butt to go to because you got to take time off, you got to travel and stuff, and that's time that's spending away from my drawing board and doing stuff because I'm a firm believer as a creator that you have to do something every day. You got to sit down. So you got to treat it like a regular job. You got to treat it like a regular job. You got to. That's how I'm able to get Ninja High School out and get Tomorrow Girl out and get all these other stuff out because it's got to be done because they ain't drawing themselves.
Yes.
Until AI comes along and says, "Hey, I can draw that for you."
Before we let you leave here, we got to talk about one thing. I don't know. I don't think the guys have talked about it yet. Well, I had to run away for a second, but that's the exciting comics news. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. What do you need to know?
Just what's going on with it, and can you tell the public about it? That's watching right now.
Well, Exciting Comics is a revival of the Golden Age version of Exciting Comics. We basically it's our superhero anthology. Because quite frankly, I was not satisfied with the state of superhero comics. But to take on Marvel and DC head on is suicide. So there's no reason for us to attempt to even bother to do that. But I see a lot of great independent creators out there making fantastic superhero comics, and they just need a venue to get their stuff in the comic book store. So I revived the anthology because, a lot of people don't know this, but in the Golden Age of comics, every comic was an anthology. It wasn't just one story in a comic. It was a 64-page comic and usually had 5, 6, 7 stories in each comic.
All different genres.
All different genres, all different characters, things like that. Like in Action Comics #1, Superman was not the only character in that book. He only took a small portion, of that comic.
Yep.
And that's what I'm trying to revive. I'm trying to revive the anthology format for comics because when I first proposed it to AP, they were very reluctant. So, anthologies don't sell. Nobody cares about anthologies. I love anthologies.
I agree.
Fantastic format to try new things. So I said, what can I do? At first, I thought we'd just create our own superhero title, but I thought to myself, no one's going to care about that, because. But I said, but if I claim a public domain title like Exciting Comics, which actually has quite a legacy. In the Golden Age, a lot of collectors are very familiar with Exciting Comics.
Well, Ben, I don't know if you noticed the name of my store. but it's Wonder World comics because I thought the exact same thing. My business partner was like, well, they haven't used it in 60 years. Why don't we? And
Absolutely.
I was like, yeah, let's do it.
It was an abandoned title. So I did some research. I found it was an abandoned title. So I said, okay, I'll just lay claim to it and make it. Now, anybody can do their own exciting comics. It's a public domain title. The trick is getting it out. Continuity. At first, my original plan was to revive a whole bunch of public domain superheroes, but that proved to be way too much resources were involved. So I decided, I'm just going to turn it into a superhero anthology and let people turn in their own versions of superheroes and just do it that way. So I decided to do it as a monthly. It's more or less now like 9 or 10 times a year because we had to make room for other anthologies that we picked up, like in Planet Comics and Jungle Comics. So we had to make room for that as well. So we're doing quite well. I mean, Exciting Comics is almost getting to issue 50, so we're doing. We're chunking it out. Jungle Comics is just past issue 25, and Planet Comics is almost in issue number 30. So we're there's obviously a lot of material out there that can be done. Yeah.
Well, if you're an up and coming creator out there, you guys, make sure you guys go to the link in the description below, or just go to Ben's webpage, which is also the link. There's an Exciting Comics guidelines there, and explains everything about this project for creators and some stuff you might need to know to get in contact with them. And of course, us being a channel that talks about comic books and the industry comics, we will be talking about this many more times throughout the year. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, and I hope to hear more about it in the future. So great.
Before we let him go, most important question of the night, Ben, when are you starting your petition to get McDonald's to carry ramen?
Apparently some places the McDonald's do carry ramen now. It just occurred to me that I don't know why they don't. It just seems like something they could easily carry. First of all, ramen is dirt cheap. It's like anybody can afford ramen. So and I always wondered what a McDonald's version of ramen would be like anyway. So and how would they serve that? I was thinking they could probably do it like those Campbell's little.
Yes, 1 cups.
Yeah,
you do something like that, So
there you go.
Drink it, while you're in the car.
Amen. Amen.
All right, awesome.
Well, Ben, I want to say thank you, along with these guys. Thank you for coming on, and most importantly, we would love to have you on anytime that we can get you on. So I hope that you enjoyed your time here, and we can get you to come on here in the short future to talk more about these amazing projects that you have going.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I love talking about being being in Dallas. It's hard to get together with like-minded people who know about the old days of collecting, and to talk about comics, just to talk about the old times and how things used to be and how things we can make better.
Yes.
How much we could accomplish if we were just unified instead of fighting each other all the time. It seems like we're almost the comic industry always has a antagonistic attitude toward everything.
Well,
creators against creators, publishers against creators, fans against creators. It just it seems very very unproductive.
Yes.
And I just had this in a conversation last week in between these shows, and somebody who we all know very well actually had one of the greatest takes on this. And he's like, we all grow up reading comic books, and we have the mentality that we're either the hero or the person who's opposed to us is the villain. So therefore we transpose ourselves onto that dynamic that we've all grown up reading. And we sometimes become so heroic that we don't realize we're being the villain to the other person.
Yeah.
And because they're also in comic books and they think they're the hero, and the more the person who thinks they're the hero is pushing back, they just become more the villain. And that's why comic grudges going back 60 years are so vitriolic, because we both people in the argument think they're the hero.
Well, It's just to show you the power of comics, man.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's a great.
go.
That's a great
Amen.
way to put it.
If you can change people's attitude by simply reading a comic book, then you know you've gotten to something here.
Yeah.
There we go. There we go.
All right, buddy.
Ben, thank
Cheers.
you so
Appreciate
much.
it.
Ben,
Cheers
it has
to
been
you.
a true pleasure having
Yeah.
you on tonight.
Oh yes, I'll be happy to come on anytime you ask.
Thank you,
All
sir.
right.
All right. Good night, Ben.
Yes,
Night.
thank you for having me.
That was amazing, you guys. Ben Dunn, one of the people who we here at the show hear the most praise about when it comes to people we've had on the show. I mean, Ross Ritchie talked about him last week and what a big inspiration he was on Ross, and multiple guests on the show have brought up Ben Dunn and how inspirational he is to comic books.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about Ben is he's so social. I mean,
Yes.
if you follow him on Facebook, it's 2 to 3 different posts that transcends 3 to 4 different projects he's on. So that was an awesome guest to have.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, it just goes to show, before we get into Tony here,
Mm-hmm.
this guy's been in the biz for over 30 years. He's been a collector for over 40 years. You know, I was more upset for him not getting a penny out of Netflix than he was, because he was just happy to see something he drew on the screen. And you know, and that's where that love and passion just kind of eats away from the ego and the hubris that, like, why aren't I a Hollywood superstar writer? And no, he was just happy to see Ariel up on a screen anywhere,
Yes.
whether he
Yes.
made a penny off of it or not.
Well, you know, you gotta work hard in this industry, and that's a perfect segue to our next guest, who, in my opinion, is one of the hardest working man of comics. And if you guys don't believe me, here's a perfect image. Not only is he putting out 4 books monthly, he's working at comic shops. This is how much this guy loves comics, ladies and gentlemen. Let me introduce the one and only Tony Fleecs. Thank you, Tony.
All right, and just before Tony starts, Adam, he was in a comic book store holding up comics and hand selling comic books.
There you go.
So Blind Adam's in the chat. We always have to describe the picture.
Yes, yes.
I don't
Look
think
at that.
Blind
Keep
Adam's
it real
great.
for Blind Adam.
What a
Blind
great
Adam's
photo,
cool.
man.
All
Where was this, Tony? What was going on here?
This was at Collector's Paradise in North Hollywood. They had done that before with Philip Sablick from Boom had gone in there and worked. I'm the first creator to go in there and work a shift. I worked on the day that Uncanny Valley came out.
That's
I can't remember who the
awesome.
other. We had some other. It might have been Dinesh back in the Valiant days. But, yeah,
I will say, I actually made the first pitch for a famous person to come and work at my store. If you remember, Corey Feldman was putting out there that he couldn't get work, and I made an offer on Bleeding Cool to hire him to come in and make bags and boards at my store.
That would have been
oh
great.
yeah.
That would have been great.
Could have signed those Frog Brothers comics.
My origin story is I didn't know there was such a thing as a comic book store until I saw Lost Boys. So
Yeah.
blame Corey Feldman, everyone.
Yes.
Now, Dennis, before we get into it,
Oh, Jesus.
You sound like talk radio now. Is something different? You're like last time I was on a podcast with you. You were not this vociferous.
Look, Brian, I've already gotten into a fight with half of Tony's comic creators in the last month. I don't need to take this shit.
There you go.
I'm being complimentary.
Yeah, he's giving you a compliment. I think that's a great compliment.
I
He sounds good,
because
'cause
that time we talked was Stray Dogs times. You bought a page of original art. I'll never forget.
Yes.
But I don't remember you being this loud. I guess.
Well, it's because he's got a new mic.
Commanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I forced,
what it is. Okay.
I forced him to get one of those, Tony. Yeah.
Yeah. Brian
Well, you sound great.
immediately said that your mic is shit, Dennis. If we're gonna do this, you better get a better fucking mic. So I went down to Guitar Center and I was like, my producer says I need to get a Shure, whatever, and they're like, it's right over here. I was like, all right,
Gotcha.
boom.
Nice and easy.
That's what I need to get. I'm just on my laptop. I don't even have a mic.
Yes, it will
So
help.
you've been, and we're going to get into everything, Tony, but you have been my argument in my fight against CGC. And And I actually got one. I had, I supported Stray Dogs very heavily, mainly because I knew you at the time, and I saw the writing on the wall. And I actually got a 9.9 on one of my raw regular covers of Stray Dogs. But I also got my acetate and got a 9.8 on it because they were all perfect.
Right.
And when the Clayton Crane Ultimate
Acetate
Fallout 4 acetate gate happened, you were my argument. I'm like, how is it that Stray Dogs with a production added acetate by Image, by the creators, not 199 is present on the acetate. However, you had, 10 9.9s on Ultimate Fallout and 5 10.0s for something they stapled and added after the fact.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about what?
The fix was in, you think?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Well, I have forthcoming news with CGC, so all I can say is that they're beautiful people.
They bought off another one. They bought off another one.
Listen, when they buy you off, they really come through. So I hesitate to say anything negative about them.
Well, this was a beautiful book, and I hate the fact that a badly produced book really puts any type of shade on this book. So I want to remind everybody how beautiful this book is, and to go on the secondary market and try to find one. But if you do take my advice, good luck. That's all I got to say.
I kind of are they hard to find now?
Oh, I imagine they are. They were hard to find when they came out. Yeah.
I feel like I only have one of them.
Yes.
I didn't mind it too much. I just remember all of a sudden people were talking about that book again one day, and I was like, "What is that? What's going on here?"
Well, what's great about this book is it is truly the definition of subverting expectations. You have this cute little, dog, and it's right out of a All Dogs Go to Heaven Disney-esque, fluffy rainbows and unicorns type story. And then it takes a dark turn.
Yes.
And then that's the best thing you can do is just suck people in with one genre they think they're getting, and then just flip it on their end. And if they don't love it, it's fine. Go find something else. But when they do love it, you have that audience captured.
And they loved it. They loved it so much that now you've got a new book, Feral, out that isn't necessarily from this universe per se, but it kind of got. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody yet, but it kind of came from this book that you and Trish doing this book and the creative team doing this book. And how has been the response on Feral so far?
Feral's, so far it's been great. It's the sales have been great. What I hear from retailers and fans has been great. And we're just excited to be to do a new story and put a new story out there. You're right. It's not in the exact same world, but it is. We call it sort of like a sister book, or like a sideways sequel or whatever. It's the same genre basically, but it's not the same story. But it's about a bunch of cats that get lost in the woods during a nightmarish rabies outbreak. So it's basically the same rules as zombies, but for little cats. 3 issues are out, so we can spoil it if you want. We're into it at this point.
Yeah, another Image comic that is coming out with you guys, and it is absolutely gorgeous inside and out. You guys didn't do as many covers, variant covers this time around, but that's okay because you still put out enough to kind of whet the appetite with the covers you put out.
Definitely that market has changed in between Stray Dogs days and now. So I think we still we punched our weight pretty good with those stinking variant covers.
Oh, yes.
I think we had at least like 30 or something. So
Oh,
happy to be at the part of the book now where we're just, making the book and not doing as much of that other,
One of the things that I'm sorry. Did you?
No, go on.
One of the things that I've loved about you and your recent, and you've been, first of all, we didn't do our question. We'll do that after this question. you've been in the business for a long time, but you've really just hit your giant kind of breakthroughs in the last 5-6 years, right? Is that fair to say?
Probably four years, maybe. What 2021?
Well, you were starting to do some of those big variants for Marvel, those 1 in 25s for Miles. That was like 5-6 years ago, right?
That was all Stray Dogs. That was all 2021, 2020, 2021.
Okay.
I'll give it to you, though. Split the difference.
You have understood where nostalgia plays a giant part of what we all do better than I think anybody else. You embraced your ability to manipulate the art to looking like old stuff, older vintage book before there was really that huge love for that style. You understood, you and Trish understood for our property, the horror genre can be a kind of vessel for us to take one single book and convert that into, what was it, 50 different variants for number one? 40?
At least. Yeah, many.
Yeah. So, but they were all based off of the love of nostalgia. Can you talk a little bit about nostalgia influencing your direction at this point?
Well, yeah, I'm with the Stray Dogs and the Feral, like that genre that we sort of are trying to carve out. It is we're taking a thing that feels familiar to people, that sort of like 90s animated Don Bluth-y Disney looking style, and then telling a story that feels different from that, but also doing those horror covers was a way for us to say, like, this is what you're going to get. Here's this cute thing, and it also it should have this sort of this dark horror energy as well. Yeah, I'm trying to think how to put it into words the way we're trying to use nostalgia. Trying to use nostalgia to do something original, I guess, it seems a little bit lofty, but like, I don't just want to make throwback stuff, like because I have that skill set. You see when we do those covers, or you talked about the pulp covers that I do. Like, I could just do, no disrespect, but I could just do like Big Bang Comics versions of this stuff, right? Like we could just make Don Bluth comics, or we could just make Looney Tunes comics, or
Scrooge McDuck,
or like with Local Man, we could just make like a throwback Image comic. But so all of the stuff I do is sort of like informed by the things that I love, I guess. And so with this talent I have for being able to basically just graphic design pretty well, and make stuff look like other stuff, right. I think Brad Nichols is really good at that too. Like, he can do that on those Pooh covers. Like, he can make it look exactly like the other thing. And that's something that I'm good at. And it's something that when you are good at it, you notice when somebody misses the mark on it, and it's like frustrating.
Well, and actually, I sat down with Tim Seeley 2 weeks ago, or a week and a half ago, and
he told you.
So he told you the other part of the story too.
Go on.
Okay, but either way, I said to him, I go, look, the only time I ever had to go to Zenescope and tell them they went the wrong direction was issue 7 or 8, when they put Jack and the Beanstalk on the cover.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Tim, your whole history is tits and ass. And I'm looking through Local Man, and I'm like, where's the tits and ass from the 90s? I mean, there's a million tits and ass. You're telling me you couldn't ape, Liefeld's Evangeline #2, naked, pregnant, and on the cover.
Sure.
There's a ton of the Glory, Flaxen, all of these. There's a whole genre of the 90s that, out of all people, Tim Seeley isn't capitalizing on.
I feel like he's sort of his whole life is capitalizing on that. Local Man's like the one place that he's not doing it as much, but I feel like we get some TNA in there as well. Bad Girls definitely was a bunch of that. We've got.
I apologize. Go ahead. Well, I've had a lot of people reach out to me to talk about Local Man, and one of the things that I'm hearing from the majority of them is one, obviously how good it is, but how they feel like it doesn't get enough press, because if more people knew about this book and were reading this book, it would be one of the biggest books in comics.
Well, listen, I agree.
I know you agree, but can you talk a little bit about that struggle? I mean, I know I'm not saying that it's not on a publisher that's necessarily big enough for people not to see it. It's on Image, but there's still always a struggle no matter what publisher you're on to get eyes on that book. And what's that struggle like, especially lately with Local Man?
Well, I mean, we launched it at maybe the very bottom of comics, like we came out February of last year, and nothing, like we sold about half what we expected based on, I guess, nothing, just based on like a conservative guess of what Tim sells versus what I sell, but both of us sort of doing something a little bit different than what we normally do. So it has been a struggle for sure. We're starting to climb, FOC is this weekend for issue 11. Last issue 10, we saw a bit of a bump, which had been, dropping a couple hundred every issue for the whole run of the thing. And then sometimes 500 and then something, so it's been tough, but we just got nominated for the Eisner.
Amen.
We go to conventions, people that's all people want to talk about. People want to talk to me about Local Man more than they want to talk about Feral, which sells 5 times as much as Local Man, or it's interesting. It's definitely the sort of thing where when we talk about nostalgia, it is the sort of thing where when you see that book, that it's made by people that are from we're one of you.
Yep.
And so I think part of that is that's part of it. People see that book and they go oh, I want to talk to this guy about Darker Image, or I want to talk to them about Tribe, or so that's part of it. But then I do think people are sort of into the mystery of it and into the story of it too, and the characters.
Yeah, I think that's the important part also with there's and this isn't we're not saying anything that's new, but there is this thing in comics today where the backlash is that the majority of comics out there aren't well written. The stories aren't very good. And there are books out there though, even right now, that are some of the best comics that I've read in years. And that's the important part, is to let people know that, okay, maybe not every Batman, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four book that's being put out right now is good. But there's books out there like Local Man. There's the stuff at Ghost Machine. There's, there's the Energon universe that are just, like I said, some of the best stuff I've read and seen in a long time. It's out there. You just have to find it. And more people like us, me, who do these, shows, and you have these networks, and comic store owners like Jesse and Dennis, we really need to, to let people know if we like something, here's what you want to read. And it feels like that doesn't happen as much as it did back in the day, because one, there's not as many stores available, and two, it's just the cyclical thing with comic books is it's more based right now on collecting and cover, type deal.
Well, and also, can you tell us about the decision? Because I like I said, I was talking to Tim, 2 weeks ago. 1 through 6 had a lull. And then all of a sudden, your audience did pick up on was it trade 1 through 5 or trade 1 through 6?
For first trade was 1 through 5.
1 through 5. So from what Tim was telling me, 6 picked up over 5, and you were doing better on 6 through 10 than you were on 1 through 5. Like it was picking up a steam or something.
It was 2 trades. So it dropped all the way up until about issue 10. And that's when it started to pick up.
Okay,
but,
so yeah, that way he was trying to explain that to me. But that, to me, as 2 guys who have been in this business for as long as you have, the instinct is, all right, let's kill Local Man at issue 10 if this thing ain't doing it. And then let's do Local Man Volume 2, number 1, 10 different variant covers and blah, blah, blah. But you guys were like, No, we're sticking this out because we're really behind our own product to the point where we're gonna let this thing sink or swim on its own on its own steam
merit. Yeah.
And then it finally picked up.
Well, and also we asked, we asked Image if we should relaunch Local Man #1, and they told us that you guys are hip to that now, and you would just order it like it was Local Man #10.
Yeah.
So
Right, exactly.
That's a little inside baseball there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we do. I mean, what Tim said is right. We do stand behind the book, and I think there's something cool about picking up, issue 13 of a thing, and issue 30 and issue, like some of these books we're hoping to do for a long, long time. But yeah, I mean, there was a point where we were making $0 on it, and if launching a new #1 would have meant that we made enough to, pay ourselves the time it takes to make it, then that would, that's in the conversation. But
yeah,
it's doing better now. It's starting to pick up, and I think it is a thing where you get more trades behind it, and you get more talk, like we're talking right now, and every new story arc's a new chance for somebody to jump on. Every new trade is, I talked to people that read the first 2 trades and now they're reading it in singles, and it's different than my other experience. I just only have these 2 creator-owned experiences at this point, where I have the one where you sell literally a million comics, and then I have this one. It's just, it takes a little more finessing, and it's my shitty baby, It's my.
So I want to go all the way back to the beginning. So do you partake in the participation of exclusives for stores? So do you say yes or no on that? Do you have a limit in your mind? And then also, you said there has been a flip a little in the script of exclusives. What was that flip that you're seeing?
I mean, it seems like it happened in between the dogs and cats, right? Like during COVID, during stimulus checks, during, the sort of like collector boom, and also Stray Dogs had, you were talking to Ben Dunn about options and stuff. Like there was speculator option stuff on Stray Dogs. And so, like that one we did, like on the second Stray Dog series, we had like between the 2 issues, like 130, 140 variant, like retailer variant covers.
Wow.
And we had, like, I am more involved than some people, I guess, less involved than other people. I sort of have oversight as far as like, does this look professional enough, but that sort of also comes down to the design and the logos and stuff. I'm not sort of standing in somebody's way if they want to have like their buddy who shops at the store draw their cover, because that's basically on them, like they have to sell those books, and if they think they can make that work, that's fine. I just sort of make sure it looks like a movie poster or like a Stray Dogs cover. Numbers are set by the publishers, like I don't, if they want to do, usually they just do the minimum. The Image, it's 500, I think. And that is just like economically, I'm open to them because that's basically $500 towards the project, after printing. And, like if you make about $1 a comic, then that's $500 extra that we're sort of like stacking up on the book that we can continue to keep making the book and pay my mortgage and, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, you're not doing this for free. You're doing it, one, for your love of comics, but this is your business. This is your job.
It's my only job. Yeah. But definitely, I feel like Stray Dogs was part, like there at the I wouldn't call it the mountaintop, sort of like the excess, like when it was the most variant-y, and there was, 1 million online retailers and pop-ups and, 1 million people sort of like getting in on this business that was, I know people that are just like, I don't have a store. I just like, first I was collecting these, and then I found out for X amount of dollars, I could hire somebody and make a cover and sell them. And, like, almost like, like stock trading or something, or crypto or
Sure.
Well,
sure.
let's get into our standard questions for all of our guests real quick. So what was your first comic book you remember holding, and where and when did you get that?
First one I remember holding was either the Death in the Family trade paperback or Detective Comics. God, I can never remember the number. I think it's a Norm Brayfogle cover. It's the one where Batman is like tearing a demon in half, and he's like this, and it's like orange, and it has the cool Batmobile in it. God, I can't remember it, but it's a rad cover. But it was like 1989 Batmania.
Okay.
And then I didn't actually start buying comics regularly until a couple years after that, until Jim Lee X-Men #3 was the first one that I remember seeing at a comic book store, realizing that there were comic stores, seeing that on the shelf at one and just being like, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Like, I can't believe the people can draw like this.
Yeah. That's
and so the follow-up to that is, to you, besides a place to buy comic books, the patented answer, what is a comic book store to you, other than also a second job?
It was my high school second job. I guess it was my second job in high school. To me, it seemed like a endless. The comic store I went to in high school was like walking distance from I could walk across a park from my school, and it was like on one of the streets downtown in Colorado Springs. And it's just like a dingy little shop, but they had new comics, and they had back issues, and they had a quarter pile. And so it just seemed like endless content, like endless input for me as somebody that was like hungry to take in as much of this as possible. And I sort of knew at that point that I wanted to learn enough about this to do it, to like make these things, that just the idea of being able to like take in as much as possible. And the comic shop guys that were there were opinionated, and they would put me onto stuff that like was from their generation. And so I was like, like they were disgusted that I liked Image Comics and Jim Carrey movies, like, because they were cooler and smarter than that. And so they put me on to like the Bill Sienkiewicz stuff and Howard Chaykin stuff, and sort of like that generation right before that,
right, sure.
where, they were old enough.
And the thing is here's the thing. Some people now say that is why they hate comic shop retailers, but there's something about the people like you and me. We have similar stories on that, where dude, I remember the snooty prick at the comic book store I went to was just trashing on the new Marvel stuff. This was when Tony got his Silver Centurion armor, and Hulk was gray, and Daredevil had his plated armor, and Cap was U.S. Agent, and they're just shitting all over it. Man, you've got to read Cerberus. And I'm like, hey, I get it. Cerberus is cool. But Cerberus is cool when you have a little bit more education in comics, and you realize Cerberus is tearing down comic books. If you start with Cerberus, you're going to go in a different direction.
Yes.
And these snooty comic book store owners, which in hindsight, they were all 100% right. I mean, they turned you on to Sienkiewicz. They turned you on to all this stuff. But as your first book, sometimes you need a Jim Lee.
Amen.
You need to find
something. The things about those books that captured my attention, my imagination, were that they were by young kids, basically for young kids. I was 12, 13 years old, and Image Comics were about incredible rage and rebellion and big breasts and just guns and it just felt like you weren't supposed to have it.
America.
Yeah, exactly. But also it was sanitized too. They didn't even have any bad language in them. So I knew that this is aimed at me, but for the badass version of me, not the little twerpy the kid that was.
Yeah, you're not reading Fred Hembeck or Gru at this point, Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I was 15 years old, and I listened to the snooty guys. I picked up Watchmen. At 15 years old, I read Watchmen. I didn't get it. I literally got to issue 9, and they didn't have. They're sold out of 10, and I can't remember why. But I had read up to 9. I never picked up 10. I bought 11 and 12 just to have it till I found 10.
Too
and
wordy.
I didn't pick it up until 2009. And when I read the trade paperback, I was like, I still don't get it. But the thing was,
too many words for Dennis.
What?
Too many words for Dennis.
Too many words.
No, it wasn't. No, hold on. I'll tell you. I'll give you a quick answer because this is Tony's show, but I don't want to totally sidetrack it. But the reason is I thought it was actually a murder mystery about finding out who killed the comedian. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. This guy's a son of a bitch. Fuck him. Yeah. I think they should have all killed him at some point in the 30 years prior to this. And it wasn't until I saw Zack Snyder's movie that I realized, oh, wait, you were supposed to think that Modern Night Owl, was one of the suspects. And I never suspected him from the art or from the ability. But when Zack Snyder showed him wailing on those guys in the alley, I'm like, oh, shit, did he kill the comedian? I never considered him a suspect. Mm-hmm. And then literally issue 10, the switch turns and you're like, oh, this isn't a murder mystery at all. It was all a red herring by Ozymandias to get you to not realize what he was really doing. And then I'm like, the movie had to show that to me.
Yeah. Yep. That happens for a lot of people.
I think, sure. And I think the one thing you have to, and I'll be devil's advocate here since I started selling in a comic book store in 1982. The owners back then were very protective. We weren't even allowed to sell new issue independents to the following Monday. So Marvel DC came out, everything came out on Friday, but we would only release Marvel and DC on Friday and the independents on Monday, because there was this sense that they had made this money through decades through Marvel and DC, and all of a sudden you had these little snippets coming in and trying to, we want you to do this, we want you to do that. I remember looking at order sheets for Marvel and DC in the 80s, and they'd be these big packs, and then you'd have this small little page for independence. So I think as the 90s came, more store owners came in, younger guys, they really didn't have that Marvel DC lore. You get into 91, 92, 93, Valiant Image comes into play. So I think we have this huge dynamics of change, not just in culture, but I think change of the guard, which was the big thing. And we made that decision to move forward in this kind of cool, independent direction.
Well,
that's fascinating.
Well, also because those first indies were too smart for a lot of people, especially the retailers. Look at First Comics doing Elric, Michael Moorcock's Elric. That was not a book for the guy who was reading Captain America, at that time.
But you got to keep in mind, Dungeons and Dragons was huge at that time. Yeah. And so there was this cross generation of trying to get that Dungeons and Dragons customer over to that direction.
Yeah.
Man, fascinating.
Well,
I mean, that does make sense. First Comics is a good example of that too, where Marvel and DC were it was before Dark Knight, before Watchmen, before they decided to sort of like grow up their books a little bit themselves. And I feel like First Comics was like American Flag, and like they were doing those books that were like, all right, if you read these books and now you're 5 years older and you've gone to college now, or you're out of high school or whatever, you've read books, here's something for you.
Yeah. And I think that the bigger thing is, the one thing I tell people, this is the funny part, the biggest change in the comic book world was very simple, 50 cents to 60 cents. And the reason why you could walk into a store with $1 and get $2. Then it went to 60 cents, right? So now you could only get one book. So you had to be smarter. You had to know a little bit more than you normally would of just walking up and saying, I'll take that G.I. Joe and that Transformers, right? Now you had to be a little bit smarter. It's the biggest change. I remember people just saying, what do you mean I can't get 2 new issues for $1? Right? Yeah. So we've gone through some crazy, crazy things. So now you get into these world of exclusives and store exclusives. You said you got 120 guys are coming out. Some guys are selling them for 10. Some are selling for 15. Some are selling for 25. This guy's selling out. This guy's not. And so I think when we look at the world you're in now. And the biggest thing that I think is great for you, you are probably one of the most level-headed people I know in the comic book industry. How do you maintain that?
I don't know. I mean, I'm just sort of. I think it's probably whatever, like Midwestern work ethic meets, like regular low self-esteem. So I don't know how you cook up this sort of level-headed. I don't feel too level-headed. I feel like I've taken on way too much stuff, and I'm just sort of like keeping my head down and pressing forward.
Well,
but as far as.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. Yeah.
I was going nowhere. I can't.
Well,
I can't.
Adam, by the way, Adam wants to know what your favorite Jim Carrey movie was back in those days.
Oh, was it probably The Mask? I guess.
I got it. I said it in the chat.
I was a big Mask fan too back then. Well, going along with what Jesse said about your level-headedness and this and that, and anytime we have a publisher on that you have a book with, I like to ask about you. And we do that quite a bit on this channel. And I don't know if you saw last week, but I'm going to play it for you because Ross Ritchie was on last week and he had a great thing to say about you in this next book I want to talk about, Uncanny Valley. So here we go. Let's go ahead and play it for Tony.
I did not see this.
Before we get you out of here, I want to talk about a newer project that I absolutely love. One of my favorite creators, Tony Fleecs, and Uncanny Valley.
Tony,
absolutely amazing stuff. Yeah, tell us tell us about Tony. What you like about Tony, because he is one of our favorite guys over here at Beyond Wednesdays.
Well, Tony is pure. Tony is just a good dude.
Yep.
And Tony's been living in Southern California forever, and you see Tony at all the shows. And he was the My Little Pony guy.
Yep.
And he was the My Little Pony guy for a long time. And before that, he was an indie comics guy. And he never quite found that niche to sort of, with his style and what he wanted to do, that he could really carve out his place. And so when the My Little Pony gig popped up and it was regular work, I was so excited. Like, I'd see him at Long Beach Comic Con and just high-five him and be like, so excited, because I bought all those books for my kids, and it was like, Dad knows the guy that draws My Little Pony. Oh my gosh, and so making me look like a rock star. And the way that Tony has become white hot and landed and just reinvented himself, it just couldn't happen to a better dude.
Yeah,
I'm so happy. I'm so excited. I think his future is really bright. It's 10 seconds before he shows up at Marvel or DC, I'm sure. I don't have any special or privileged knowledge, so I'm not telling you something that I know.
No, he's the hardest working man. He's one of the hardest working men in comics right now. I mean, I think he's got like 4 or 5 books that that's coming out on a regular basis. And like you said,
and they're good.
And they're good. Yes.
And they're good. Look, what always happens is a creator has a hit, right? And you're like, oh, this guy's so talented. And then he gets offered another series, and so he's doing 2 books a month, and they're good, right? And then when you go to 3 to 4 books where you have to write a comic a week, that's when it gets tough, right? And that's when folks it'll be a little
unless you're James Tiny, and I think he writes 1 a day.
Yes.
Well, I mean, so
it was a very good interview with Ross, and I just thought that was a very good thing. He kind of continued on a little bit more, but the book that he is talking about in all this is a book that Uncanny Valley, another great book that you are. Before this came out, you told us how proud you were of it, and there we go. You're looking forward to this coming out, and the reaction to this has been excellent from everybody that I've talked to that has read it. Of course, especially with that first issue. I love what you're doing here and what Dave is doing with the. I mean, this cover is excellent right here, and a perfect example of the whole nostalgia thing we were talking about at the beginning. You've got the He-Man stuff, the sports stuff, the G.I. Joe stuff. I mean, it's all there. This is nostalgia central with the look of it. I mean, it's just wonderful. Talk about Uncanny Valley and what's going on here.
Yeah, Uncanny Valley is it's a book that I've been sort of like thinking about and putting together for over 10 years probably. It's like longer than it lasted. Like the making of this book is longer than my marriage was. Like it is just like something that I've just sort of been like hauling around with me and sort of chipping away at. And it's a weird concept. It's about a boy who finds out that he's part cartoon. It's a coming of age Roger Rabbit, basically. It's like we pitched it as saying like it's Percy Jackson but with cartoons instead of Greek gods. But it's the sort of thing where Boom wouldn't have said, yeah, go ahead and we'll spend money on this if I wasn't coming to them right after Stray Dogs, you know, like this is the sort of thing that you can make when you've got a little bit of capital, you know. And I'm just happy that they're sort of like letting us, you know, not letting us, but you know, like making it possible for Dave and I to make this book, because it's the sort of thing where, you know, you need an artist on this that is like super good, and the super good artist can't work for free for 6 months like we have to, you know, when you're doing an image book. Like I can do Local Man because I draw it myself and Tim draws it himself, you know, and we can do Stray Dogs because Trish has a full-time job, and you know, like and Feral, you know, she keeps her full-time job, so she sort of does Stray Dogs and Feral at night while Tone and I sort of like are running it during the day. But this is the kind of book where you need somebody that can draw real and they can draw cartoon.
And by the way, shout out to Trish, who's in the chat.
Hey,
she's the #1 Dingo fan here. Uncanny Valley is so much fun.
Trish and I were on a signing tour together when we found out that furries super love Wile E. Coyote, like in a sexy way, and I had no idea.
And we just had Antarctic Press on before you, which is kind of the beginning of the furry comic craze.
Yeah, they were right out there. Them and Fantagraphics and yeah. But yeah, basically putting this book together is sort of a long time dream come true. Just the way that it's coming out, the way that it looks, and the way that people are reacting to it. I sort of have had it's always been something that's been close to my heart, and it's been something that I've wanted to do, and I love doing projects that seem bizarre on their face, but then when you read them, you're just like, oh, this feels good. This feels comfortable. You know, like if you were to pitch somebody who just read, you know, the X-Force or you know, like Spider-Man comics, like this is about a boy and his cartoon grandpa, you know, like it doesn't sound like the sort of thing that they could just easily jump onto. But when you read it, you go like, oh, that's dope. You know, like I watch shows on Netflix. I watch, you know, like it feels mainstream in a broader cultural way than like just comics mainstream, you know?
Yeah, that's important.
But once again, this is your love of nostalgia bleeding through.
Yeah, that one is.
You know, but it's something that you hit on it right at the exact same. Like you said, like I said, like you said, like Ross said, you had been grinding it out. You know, we knew each other before you became big, and then you just hit this stride where you kind of figured out, I'm leaning into something that I've got 25 years of experience knowing. I think the people who are reading my stuff are also in that exact same ballpark. Let's lean in.
Yeah.
And,
well, I mean,
it translates.
So much of this stuff, the cartoony stuff, comes from, it's the same place that the pony stuff came from, where like, that's how I draw. I draw cartoony. I love cartoons, you know, but I feel like I love them in a different way, like in a not like a horny way, but like I just have a different perspective on the way I perceive cartoons and what I dig about them. And I felt like when you make creator own stuff and when you want to tell stories, you want to come from a point of view that's unique. And I felt like I sort of had a point of view that hadn't been explored, and so it sort of was a lane that was wide open, and having all the experience from ponies. A lot of times I talk about how when I saw Scotty Young do Oz and then do Fairyland, it was sort of like a key got turned, and I was like, oh fuck, that's it. Like, take all this stuff that you learned, take all this stuff from this thing and make your own thing with it. And that's sort of what all three of these, Uncanny Valley and Feral and Stray Dogs, are all sort of part of.
It's kind of your Matrix Neo moment where you're like,
Yeah.
I can see it, I understand it, and now I'm going to control it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was your first published piece in a comic book? Was it pre-2006 or around 2006?
Might have been 2005. I know it might have been The Gift number 13, Raven Gregory.
Right, sure.
For Arizona heads. So I was making comics on the message boards, like the Shane Glines message board, the Brian Bendis message board, and the Bendis message board had a bunch of like people making creator-owned comics, and like it was around the time that print on demand started happening, and so there were a lot of people doing print on demand stuff. Dave, who draws Uncanny Valley, Pat Loika would do stuff. I'm trying to remember if there's anybody that else that like super popped out of those like those early self-published comics. But my first like distributed through a distributor probably was The Gift number 13. And then my first comic was In My Lifetime later that year.
And I picked up In My Lifetime because we asked you that many moons ago on one of our shows that we've done.
One?
I found one. I did find one. It was actually signed by you. It was notated to somebody else, but it was signed by you. So I don't mind that. I'll just have to take some alcohol remover and put my name in. No, I'm just joking. But we are going to add. Yeah,
he's not joking.
We are going to add you to the Beyond Wednesday's Comic Creators First list because I didn't know about the gift book. So we're going to add that to
also the gift. Fucking very problematic. I think it's like a story about a guy that takes like his little buddy out for tacos and just basically explains how to groom. Like he's just like, you want to find a girl about 13 and then just it's like, what? I did not write it. I was just happy to be asked to draw the thing.
You know who else had a first on Raven Gregory's Gift other than you? Tyler Kirkham. You are correct.
Yeah.
That is his first stuff too. Yeah. So
what's so funny about that book, and I'll just tell you real fast, Raven would hang out at all the Atomic Comics in Arizona, and he didn't work there, right? But he would hang out, and the second someone would grab something, say, "Oh, Uncanny X-Men. You know what goes good with Uncanny X-Men?" And he'd go pick him over to give, and he would get kicked out of Atomic Comics. Like, dude. At least ask us. He's like, I'm just trying to sell books. So that's a great thing. You know, I was reading something. So you were in Wizard Magazine. Were you in a Wizard Magazine? Tell us about seeing your name in Wizard Magazine for the first time.
That was pretty crazy. That was In My Lifetime, the first comic I did in 2006, which is sort of when I decided I was in comics and I quit my real job and I just started making comics full time. It sold 700 through Diamond, 700 zero. Like that's it. No, not 700,000, 700 copies. I didn't make a nickel off of that, and
Diamond only damaged 50 to 100 of them.
Yeah.
Well, I had a cardstock cover, so it was safer that way.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Pretty good.
And less profitable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I found out later that my local comic shop had ordered 400 of those 700. So that means I called 500 comic stores. So that means out of those calls, I sold 300 comics, basically. But that book made a lot of noise for something that was sort of so small. And I think it was just a matter of like the publisher that I published with, Silent Devil, had like a lot of friends through conventions and stuff like that. And people were sort of rooting for them and they were doing interesting stuff, like they were doing some bizarre stuff. But then they did cool stuff. Like I think Dracula versus King Arthur was a cool book. I think they did this book called Antigone that was cool. They did this thing called Astronaut Dad that was cool. And so I think people were sort of watching them and sort of like watching to see if they were going to do something cool. And my book just happened to be one of those things that came out and was different at the time. It was an autobiographical book that was by just a regular, like 24 at the time year old sort of dork who liked comic books and, it was sort of like there was like copybook tales. It was a little bit Alex Robinson-y, but more through like a sarcastic Kevin Smithy, however you write when you're 20, 25 years old.
Right.
But it caught the attention of people at Wizard, and they wrote a review of it. It was like their what's new for summer, keep an eye on this indie. It wasn't a Palmer's pick, but it was like something to watch for in indie comics. And it popped up in there twice, like two different sort of like consecutive issues, or maybe an issue in between. And I just remember like how huge that was for me. Cause like I said, like I'm an Image Comics kid. I'm obviously a Wizard magazine kid. And that was part of me just being like, well, I make comics now. Like I don't have to work at this regular job anymore. I'm going to go, make my way as a comic book professional. And then I was in a total of 3 times. Like they talked about it in my lifetime twice. And then I went and did a panel at when I moved out to LA, I did a panel at like a library, and it was me and Ross Ritchie and Mark Waid and Josh Fialkov and Kazu Kibuishi before Amulet, maybe even before Flight. Maybe it was right when Flight was happening. But like sort of like a bunch of nobodies who would later, I think Ross was popping at the time. Obviously Mark Waid was popping at the time. but Wizard for some reason took pictures at that thing, and then they printed in the news and notes, like things that are happening.
Sure.
And so then I just popped up in like signing comics next to Mark Waid in Wizard magazine, almost like the other person besides Buddy Holly, besides Richie Valens.
Yeah.
So did you know before the Wizard magazine came out, or you were reading the magazine and you saw?
Oh yeah, no, I didn't. I just had a subscription.
Nice.
Oh wow.
Came to my house. And that one. Oh no, go ahead. The library one was crazy too, because when I went to get my passport, they needed more than just like your ID and your birth certificate and stuff. They needed, for some reason, for me, they needed to double check that I was who I said I was. So I sent them a photocopy of Wizard magazine with like my name circled and pointing to a picture of me.
So the library was out of the country?
No, it was just here, but that was later to get a passport. Like they just needed more. Okay, it was like, what other forms of identification? And they're like, have you been in the press? Have you? I guess so, yeah.
Wow.
And I was just going to say that Wizard magazine didn't go bankrupt for another 4 years, so you can't be held responsible for that.
Not my fault. No, absolutely not.
But what is your fault is shout out to King of the Golden State. He says, shout out to Tony for doing my commission of Ace the Bat Hound and Crypto at Berkeley Comic Con. So thank you, Golden State.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
I just wrote Ace the Bat Hound and Crypto. Ross Ritchie was right. Me and Mike Norton are doing Super Pets right now at DC, like just a one shot.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, that's super cool, man. Oh yeah.
Battle Pug meets Stray Dogs.
Yeah.
Well, we also, that same Ross Ritchie show, we had Nick Barucci on, and Nick's been on the show multiple times. And, we asked Nick a few months ago, I'm not going to have to make you sit through that too, but we asked Nick a few weeks ago what he, about you also. And he said the same great things that Tony said, or that Ross said about you. And of course, Dynamite Publishing, putting out the Army of Darkness book that you're working on. And I gotta say, you talked about the 3 like cartoony books. Then you've got these Army of Darkness along with great art and covers in it. But Arthur Sidem is doing these amazing zombie covers on it, which are definitely not cartoony. Talk about Army of Darkness Forever.
We're actually, I'm writing issue 10 of that. No, 11. I'm closing in on the end because we're going to do 13 issues total of this thing. But it's basically the sequel to Army of Darkness, both the theatrical US ending and the international like deleted ending where Ash wakes up in the sort of like post Planet of the Apes future where the whole world's been destroyed. He's in the post-apocalypse. And they came to me and offered me this book. It got to be like 2-3 years ago now. long time ago, and they were like, what would you do with Army of Darkness? We want to do something cool for the 30th anniversary. And I just asked them, like, if any, because they've been making this book steadily, you know, every month basically for 20 years. And I said, has anybody done the deleted ending, you know, like the international ending where Ash wakes up in the future? And somehow they had not. And so I just thought, well, that seems like an opening and a way to do something that would, I treat every job like it's a creator-owned comic, you know, like I put the same amount of care into writing Army of Darkness that I put into writing Feral or Uncanny Valley or whatever. And so I didn't want to dedicate this much of my life to just doing an Army of Darkness comic. I was like, if I do it, I want to do like the Army of Darkness comic, you know? So yeah, they said I could do that. And I basically had the idea of doing the end of the theatrical movie, Hail to the King Baby, you know, like Ash kills that Deadite and takes the stock girl at the S-Mart into his arms, and then figuring out how to like reconcile that with the end of the international ending where he wakes up in the future. And so we've sort of been doing that first with Justin Greenwood for the first arc, and then the second arc now with Pop Man, who I was a big fan of when I was a kid. Like I loved the stuff he did at Extreme Studios and Wildstorm. And I just met him at a show, and it happened to be when Justin was leaving the book, and I was like, hey, do you want to come draw Ash with me? But yeah, it's sort of like the format that I took was I said, I'm going to do like Jason Aaron did with Thor. I'm going to do 3 different timelines and have it be Ash in the future and Ash in the past, like in 1993, and then go all the way back to medieval times and sort of follow Sheila along. And then just like Jason Aaron did, sort of collide those things and make them sort of intersect with each other and influence one another and sort of head towards this big ending where they're all sort of crash into each other. So yeah, it's been a blast. It's been like super fun to make that book with Dynamite. I've done covers for every issue, which is just another exhausting
part add to the list.
Coming up with a 3 months.
The question I was going to ask you is, how do you do time management for all these titles? I mean, is it one day, okay, I'm just doing this, not even then think of anything else, and then you have a new hat on the next day? How do you run your time management on this?
I mostly get the most work done at nighttime or on the weekend or whenever there's not emails. Which is, I would hear people say when I was aspiring, when I didn't have shit going on, and I was like, I'm sure it's not that big a deal, but it really is. Like, they have notes, they have changes, they need questions answered about different things. But it's not one thing per day. It's more like I'm just cranking to keep everything. I'm just trying to keep my head above water right now. Like, I'm just with some of these books are gonna. Army of Darkness is, I've got, like I said, I got like 2 more issues of it. And so that'll ease up and I'll have one less cover to do and one less script to write. And I'm hoping to just sort of keep that spot open because Feral did well enough that I don't have to scramble as hard as I was scrambling before. So yeah, if you figure out how to do time management, you let me know.
Good luck.
I will incorporate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck. I think that's one of the toughest things to learn as a human is that, 1, we don't have as much time as we think we have, and 2, how to manage that time. Because I think at some age, it's usually around, midlife, you realize, holy cow, this is going fast and it's going to end soon. And 2, how do I do everything I want to do in a day and even more? And it's damn hard. It's tough. So congrats to you.
That's how I'm sort of. Oh, thanks, man. That's how I'm looking at creator-owned comics. Basically, is I have this list of stories that I want to get to, and Uncanny Valley is one of those, and Feral is one of those, and I just I see the end of my not life necessarily, but like career. I can sort of see how many good years I've got left in me, and I'm just trying to get all of those things, put together and out there so that hopefully, I have enough of a library to sort of, not. I mean, hopefully it sustains me. Let's hope best case scenario, these books come out and they can sort of keep Stray Dogs in some shops is a perennial trade paperback seller.
Mm-hmm.
I can just have 2 or 3 of those. I'll be fine.
Amen. We're all rooting.
I got one more question, and it's more of an ethereal question. So you're the punky little kid reading Image Comics and getting told that it's dog shit by the comic retailer, but you still persist in loving those Image boys doing their thing, and then you slowly build up your cachet, and then you're doing an Image book, and you're swiping the covers of all the classic guys, and you're rubbing elbows with what's your imprint under? Who are you under at the Image?
We're Image Central. We're just regular Image Central.
Oh, okay. So Image Central. I didn't know if you were under Wills or one of the imprints or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's got to be validating that the first time the first time Rob Liefeld liked one of my Facebook posts, I'm like, oh my God, Rob knows who I am. I'm just a retailer, and when you meet Todd and Todd knows who you are and all of this, it's just some kind of validating kind of bucket list for guys of our generation.
Yeah, for sure. With those guys, I try to either not bother them or, because it's so important to what they meant to me and how they informed, I make creator-owned comics because I saw those guys do it. And that to me, the way I came up, the cool comics are the ones that the people make and own themselves. That's how I felt growing up. So that's why I don't I'm doing some DC stuff and some Marvel stuff right now, but I don't have a bucket list of I gotta write Iron Man or I just want to make my own stuff because that's what my heroes did. But Jim Valentino likes Local Man, and he'll Tone was out here working on Feral the other day, and he sent Jim a message about something, and Jim was like, "Oh, tell Tony, Local Man's been great," and that's crazy. Yeah. And then Rob has been cool about it, but I'm always afraid that he thinks we're making fun of him, which we absolutely are not. But I think he's sort of got that sort of his defenses are always up because he's been fucked on so hard for so long that he's just can see us coming like we're gonna one day switch and start making fun of him, which we do not plan on doing.
I think Rob's kind of fell into that role.
Say that again.
He's kind of fell into that role, and instead of leaning into it, and maybe carrying on a different way, he's kind of gotten to the point where we're looking at him differently now. He's made this big change, in my opinion, in the last couple of years with his podcast and all the stuff that he's doing, and where I think he's kind of starting to realize it's all just a joke. Let's just laugh at it together. But you're right. I think that in the back of your head, you kind of got to be I don't want to go at this guy at the wrong time. But maybe I'm looking at it differently the last year or so.
No, I'm current on the podcast, and he is not joking around. He's he's not taking shit anymore, which I respect. He's like, listen, if you want to come with that bullshit, I got too much. I've done too much in this business to take nonsense from nobody.
So 100%. So with everything we just talked about, tell us about Fleece Designs.
That's just my incorporation, well, actually, that's not true. I do still work through there. It's what I would sort of invoice people under when I do storyboard work or design work, or right now we're doing comic book packaging for the state of California. It's just sort of on top of all the jobs that I didn't say no to in comics. When I don't say no to a job outside of comics, that's sort of what Fleece Design catches. But I also get paid, Image pays me through there, and
No, go ahead.
When I first moved out here, before I was making all of my money in comics, I was making all my money as an artist, but it was just sort of like any possible, like you need me to design packages for your, airplane batteries or, like literally anything that came along I would do. And so that's what Fleece Design was. And then when I started doing well enough that I needed to incorporate, I just called it Fleece Design. So that's my...
It's easier to not have to change the bank account either.
Right, exactly. Well, I think it's great because you got Disney, Fox, Cincinnati Bengals, Pittsburgh Steelers, and then you got Taco John's, right? And it's like your range is pretty wide there. So,
yeah, I've taken on many a client. Taco John's, I was their storyboard artist for probably 8 years, maybe more. Like I worked for this ad agency that had the Taco John's account. And so I'd drawn so many potato olays and like, combo stuffed burritos. And we went in there one time. My mom was with me and she was like, he draws the storyboards for Taco John's. And the kid that working there.
Yes, Mom. That's a mom move.
So do you want extra sauce?
right.
Yeah. I don't know what that means. That doesn't mean anything to me. I only get paid minimum wage.
Funny story about Taco John's. Real quick to all the collectors out there. Taco John's put out a sports card set locally in Iowa for the Iowa Arena Football League, whose quarterback at the time was Kurt Warner.
Yeah.
And it's the very first card ever put out of Kurt Warner, and it is impossible to at all. So, be on the lookout for that. Real quick.
Iowa Barnstormers.
Iowa Barnstormers, yep.
Yeah, there you go.
Here is the beautiful sketch that you did for our boy King of the Golden State.
Wow.
Yeah, look at that. That's absolutely gorgeous. So,
Shit that one.
Okay, so settle. Is it Fleece or Fleecs?
Fleece.
Okay.
That's hey, you just saved a lot of people right there. They're not going to mess up your name anymore, hopefully, including myself. All right, con things. You going to do San Diego this year?
I'll be at San Diego. Yeah, we got to go lose our Eisner Award, and I'll have signings and stuff at Image, and I think probably at Boom too. And I just was talking to Dynamite. They're going to have some sort of presence out there also because they're coming up on their 25th anniversary or something. Some sort of Dynamite panel.
Yeah.
Well, I know I'm going to be there. I know this guy's going to be there, and I know that guy's going to be there. So we're definitely going to all have to link up, obviously, and I can't wait to see you out there, man. We obviously root for you over here. We're going to continue to root for you and continue to do great things. We're going to end the show here soon, you guys. But Tony, stick around real quick in the backstage because we want to talk to you after the show. So thank you, man, for coming on. We're going to have you on here more. Before you leave, I want to ask you to give advice to the other young and upstarting creators. What is the most important piece of advice that you can give them off the top of your head?
Oh, man. Well, I was just talking to somebody yesterday about like a kid hit me up and he wanted to talk about making comics, and I hopped on Zoom with them real quick and sort of like talked them through some stuff. And I really like the thing that I found, and it's not like a first year move. First, you have to really like start making comics, figure out how to make a comic, figure out how, like the pacing works and the mechanics of it work. But it's very important to develop your own perspective, your own voice. Like that's the only thing that's sort of like set me apart from anything is I'm like, if I could give anyone advice, it would be don't try and make your Iron Man, don't try and make your, Transformers or whatever's hot right now. Like make something that comes specifically from you and figure out how to, what it is that you bring to it makes it different than if somebody else made it. Because that's really the only value you have is like, as a creative person, what makes what you make different from what anyone else makes? Unless you just want to make widgets, like if you just want to be good at putting together comics and you can draw Wolverine as good as everybody else draws Wolverine, they can just slot you right in. That's a different thing. But if you're trying to like create stories and sort of make your own thing, having a point of view, having a perspective that is sort of unique to you is important. I don't know how necessarily to do
there was
that,
something
but
I got. I can't remember who it was from, and it might have been from Tom Orzechowski, if you know the name. There are thousands of comic book writers. There are hundreds of comic book pencilers. There are dozens of comic book colorists, and there are it's dozen. It's something else, and then it's dozens of comic book letterers, which means there's a handful of guys doing 90% of the work on a comic book, but they do it so well, the industry doesn't need even more of them.
Yeah.
And you just reminded me of that when you were talking about, I have zero skill in any of the art of comic books. My skill and Jesse's skill is selling them. But we respect every level coming down, even at a certain level, the letterer who nobody thinks of is one of the highest skills in the industry that only dozens of people own the skill to.
Yep.
Yeah. And one of the most, like, if you screw that up, it screws up the whole thing, you know?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
there's not a good comic that's badly lettered.
I do want to do a follow-up on what you said. When you started up and it's late at night and you're stuck and you don't know where to go, time about the beginning of your career, early 2000s. But you said this young guy reaches out to you and you Zoom call him whenever, within 24 hours. Does that hurt the new generation that it's so easy to get help versus back in the day where it was, you alone with your bowl of cereal trying to figure it out?
I mean, I don't know. I don't think he's Zooming with a different comic creator every day, you know? And I would, for me, it was just harder. There was no Zoom. So I went to comic book class. I took
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Cartooning class at extracurricular stuff when I was in high school. And I met John Romita Jr. came through that and J. Scott Campbell came through that. And I remember I'm about to go sign at a bunch of stores in September, October, because I think about the audiences that I build when I do these signings. And I think about when I was in high school and I went to my shop in the mall and Paul Chadwick was there, who, is a famous, very talented artist, but there's not a gajillion Paul Chadwick fans, but I would buy any Paul Chadwick book from then on because I could go talk to him at a shop and ask him how do you make comics? He didn't even give me a particularly good answer, but just having that interaction with him and sort of having something to hold on to and go okay, that's all I have to do is that.
It's like the rubber on a go-kart track. It's not really important if you hit it head on, but it's just enough to bump you in a different direction.
Right, yeah, just bump me in the right direction.
Yeah.
So this kid that I talked to the other day, I feel like it's not like he's going to listen to everything I said, but it's just if you email me and I have 10 minutes and I can hop on and give you some quick,
that's important.
Just sort of point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
I feel like that's sort of forward shit.
That's so important also because that was something we talk about a lot here in the industry show is that people need not necessarily to be coached, but people need somebody that it helps more than just giving them something to hold on to. It helps them with their craft. It helps them to validate that, to say, hey, no, you can do this. It's possible, right? I mean, it continues their road. Having somebody who is a big part of that craft or that industry help somebody that is coming up is probably one of the most important things we do as humans that make the world go around, right? You always have a mentor and a mentee. You always have the Sith. There's always two of them, right? But that's
it goes to those Gary Reed rules that I talk about all the time. Give your knowledge and wisdom freely.
Well, and that's coming up. Like I said, I was on the Bendis board, and that's what he was doing at that time. He would be on there. People could ask him questions. He would answer process questions, even when he was doing, 6-8 books at a time. And then he would go and do podcasts like this, but his would just be all process. It would just be, John Suntress just asking him about, what format he uses and how he uses fucking Final Draft instead of, Google Docs or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, that's super important. All right, let's get you out of here. But before we do, Tony, you have won the best dressed guest so far of the show. Show him that amazing Tupac shirt.
Yeah, there you go.
You got to show it.
Yeah.
Look at that
That's
Tupac shirt.
Yeah.
That is awesome. That's a famous. We're a big fan of Tupac over here at this channel. I am, at least, and I love that famous spitting moment. So, what a great shirt! What a great shirt!
I'm a huge fan of him in the Digital Underground in Nothing But Trouble. So
there we go. Sure. There we go. So, all right, Tony.
Many people say his greatest work.
Yeah. We're gonna drop you out for a second. Stick around for a couple minutes so we can chat with you
Thanks
after the
for having
show.
me on.
No problem.
No, thanks for coming on.
All right, we'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there we go. Another episode of the Industry of Comics. Man, this is 17 episodes so far. What do you guys think of tonight's episode? Good stuff.
I think it's great, and I think the fact that what separates us so much, and I get so many calls on our show, that there's this great separation because you got two experiencers on here, you got an influencer on here, and we have these great guests that are all experiencers. So there's really the high-end opinionated points are really backed up by facts, by what they're doing. And so it gives the audience a real cool, traditional, cultured look at how the show is growing. Even our guests next week are freaking awesome that we already have. So.
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick. Next week we have Sean Kirkham, aka Big Clutch, our boy Drew from Wanted Comics, the very first, and of course that's going to be in the first hour. And the second hour we're going to have Brian Haberlin on, which is going to be awesome. So a lot of fun. Dennis, what did you think about today's episode?
Well, here's what I like to explain everything by Moneyball. Everybody's like, when are you going to get this person on? When are you going to get that person? You had Rob, you had Pariah Polito, you had, this person, that person. When are you going to get this person? And I was like, guys, I learned more tonight from talking to Ben Dunn than I've learned that whole episode with Rob Liefeld. You can learn so much by a whole bunch of base hits from somebody like Ben Dunn did for us tonight. And I guarantee you, of the 1,000 people that are going to watch this show over the next couple days, I bet you 50% of them had no idea who Ben Dunn was. Yeah. And we introduced our viewers to a comic legend.
Amen. Amen.
And then everybody, we all, in our YouTube sphere, we all know Tony.
Right, sure.
But we got to open up parts of Tony that I don't think a lot of people knew about him. So when you get to that, man, home runs all across the board. Sometimes it only takes base hits, but they all seem like home runs to me.
Yep.
Right. And I've said this before, you go to all the conventions in the world in this industry, but if you aren't doing something afterwards, you're not going to learn anything in this industry. Because that's where you learn everything, by sitting down and talking to people, having lunch. This is basically talking to people, doing whatever around the world as people watch. And so it's a very comfortable thing that we do. And I hope a lot of people take notes and learn from what they're hearing. So.
Well, to end out the show, you guys, I want to remind you to check the links below. We have, of course, Tony and Ben's links below, but we also have these guys' links below. Jesse, you could find his eBay store and his links below. You got any sales? When's the next sale, Jesse?
Next sale is about 10 minutes. Last night's show went to 5 a.m. this morning. So we're not going to do that again. I can tell you that. Last time that 1
Well,
o'clock is my
at least
breakout.
tonight wasn't a 4-hour show like last week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I will be on tonight. We'll have 200 items, mainly exclusives, variants, some hotkeys. And it's also the cool thing about my shows is it's kind of a hangout show. Even though I got all these people watching, hundreds of people, most of the time we're just talking about comics, slinging some as we're going, but we're talking about history on each comic. And so the show is, it's kind of about selling, but it's kind of about hanging out as well. So
Amen. Dennis, you got anything coming up soon? Nope.
No.
Same old Mall of
I just like
Monroe,
to
you
hang out,
guys.
man.
Go check out Mall of Monroe. Make sure you follow Dennis.
Oh, wait. Well, I have my daughter's graduation party on Sunday. So I'm taking a day off. We're closing both of the stores on Sunday to let all my staff come out and hang out and have a good time at my house.
Well, congrats.
So, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, this Thursday will mark my return to Whatnot. I will be doing a Whatnot sale, my first Whatnot sale in probably 2 years. But it's time to start funding 2024's San Diego Comic-Con trip. Starting this Thursday, I'm blowing out a ton of books. We're going to start off a ton of books at, 30, 40, 50% below FMV, and then have sales 3 a week until San Diego. Give me a follow.
Your Wi-Fi's good.
Yeah. What's that?
Make sure your Wi-Fi is good.
Yes, make sure your Wi-Fi is good. So keep an eye on the channel. Keep an eye on all of our links for more information on where you can find us, and come hang out with us. We'll see you guys soon. Much love. Adios.